Imagine carrying a heavy bag on your back every single day. At first, you don't notice it much. But as time passes, the weight grows heavier, filled with regrets from the past, fears of the future, endless desires, and things you don't really need. Eventually, the bag becomes so heavy that you can barely move forward. Now here's the truth. Most of us are living like this without even realizing it. But what if I told you there is a way to put that bag down? A way to walk lighter, freer, and calmer, no matter what happens around you. That way is the Stoic art of letting go, guided by two powerful ideas: amor fati, which means love your fate, and minimalism, which is the art of needing less to live more. The way you deal with life's weight defines the quality of your days. If you cling too tightly to possessions, to control, to expectations, you will always feel restless, anxious, unsatisfied. But if you learn to release, to accept, and to love life exactly as it comes, then you gain something money can't buy: inner freedom. Today, you're going to discover how the Stoics used these timeless principles to live with peace, strength, and joy in a world just as noisy and uncertain as ours. And more importantly, you'll see how you can apply them right now in your own daily life. So get ready, because after this, you won't just see life differently, you'll live differently. You'll understand that letting go is not losing, it's gaining space for what truly matters. Now take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's begin this journey into the Stoic art of letting go. Amor fati and minimalism. Let's begin. When you think about it, life rarely falls apart because of the great tragedies alone. More often, it is the little moments, the small irritations, the quiet storms that build up without us noticing. A rude comment, a delayed train, a phone that keeps buzzing with pointless notifications. One by one, they might look harmless, but together they create a heavy chain that ties us down. And yet, hidden inside these ordinary moments is the perfect training ground for peace of mind. The Stoics understood something that most of us overlook. Strength is not built in the middle of a crisis. It is built in the daily act of letting go. Every irritation that we release, every moment of impatience that we dissolve, every small frustration that we refuse to carry. This is how we grow the quiet power of equanimity. Not in theory, not in distant philosophy, but in the messy reality of daily life. When you start to let go of the little things, you begin to realize how much energy you've been wasting without noticing. A spilled drink doesn't have to ruin your afternoon. A slow driver doesn't need to poison your whole mood. By loosening your grip on these tiny disturbances, you begin to reclaim your attention, your calm, and your freedom. And step by step, something remarkable happens. You start to live lighter. Letting go in small moments is a discipline, but it is also a practice of kindness toward yourself. Every time you choose not to hold on to irritation, you are protecting your mind from unnecessary noise. Every time you refuse to replay an insult in your head, you are saving yourself from reliving pain that has already passed. It is not weakness to release these things. It is wisdom. Because life will always bring you annoyances, but you can decide whether you let them build a home inside you. The first key is awareness. Most people do not even realize when they are being pulled into frustration. They react without seeing. A comment at work triggers a spiral of anger. A broken glass leads to shouting. A delay on the bus turns into an entire evening of bitterness. But if you pause for just one breath, you notice what is happening. That single pause is your power. In that moment, you can decide, will I carry this or will I set it down? This pause can be trained. The Stoics called it attention to impressions. It means not blindly accepting the first emotional reaction that rushes in, but questioning it before it takes over. You can ask yourself, is this really worth my peace? Will this matter tomorrow? Will this matter in a year? By asking these questions, you open a door. On one side lies the same old path of anger and stress. On the other side is the freedom to let go. Once you learn to pause, you begin to see that irritation is nothing more than a habit. And like all habits, it can be replaced. Each time you meet frustration with patience, you carve a new path in your mind. Neuroscientists today call this neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through practice. The Stoics discovered it long before science confirmed it. By repeatedly choosing calm over anger, you strengthen the muscle of equanimity until one day you find yourself unshaken by what once drove you mad. But letting go is not just about suppressing emotions. Suppression only traps them deeper inside. Letting go is about transforming your relationship with the event. For example, when someone insults you, your first instinct might be to defend yourself or attack back. But the Stoics would ask, does this insult truly harm you, or does it only touch the image of yourself you are clinging to? If you let go of the need for everyone's approval, their words lose their power. In that instant, you are free. This freedom also applies to impatience. How many hours of our lives are wasted in waiting? Waiting for the train, waiting in line, waiting for someone to reply to a message. Most people fill this waiting with irritation, as if anger could speed up time. But here lies an opportunity. Every delay can become a gift, a reminder to slow down, to breathe, to be present. By letting go of impatience, waiting is no longer wasted time. It becomes extra space for living. Tiny frustrations are also invitations to humility. You drop a glass, you forget your keys, you make a mistake at work. Many of us treat these small failures as proof that we are clumsy, unworthy, or unlucky. But letting go means seeing them for what they are, simple moments of human imperfection, nothing more. When you release the need to be flawless, mistakes lose their sting. You stop judging yourself so harshly, and in that gentleness, you find the strength to try again with a lighter heart. There is also a deeper reason to practice letting go in small moments. Life will not always be kind. Loss, illness, and hardship will come. If you cannot release the tiny annoyances, how will you ever release the heavier burdens? Training with the small prepares you for the great. Each minor surrender is a rehearsal for the larger acts of acceptance that fate will one day demand of you. In this way, even the most trivial irritation becomes meaningful. It is the ground on which you prepare for life's storms. The practice of micro-surrenders can also free your relationships. Think of how many arguments begin with something small. A misplaced item, a misunderstood word, a delay in answering a message. Left unchecked, these little sparks grow into fires that burn trust and connection. But if you learn to let go in the moment, to choose peace over being right, you prevent conflict before it begins. You create space for kindness, for laughter, for understanding. Releasing irritation is not just a gift to yourself, it is a gift to everyone around you. Modern psychology calls this emotional resilience. It is the ability to return to balance quickly after being disturbed. The Stoics knew that resilience is not about never being shaken. It is about not staying shaken. Even Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, admitted in his private writings that he was often disturbed by others. But instead of clinging to it, He used every irritation as an exercise to return to calm. He knew that life is too short to be wasted on bitterness. Another layer of this practice is gratitude. When you feel irritation rising, you can shift your attention to what is still working, still present, still beautiful. Missed your bus? At least your legs work and you can walk. Someone interrupts you? At least you are alive to speak and be heard. Gratitude transforms small frustrations into reminders of life's hidden abundance. It does not deny the annoyance, but it places it in a wider context where it becomes too small to truly matter. Letting go in small moments also reshapes your relationship with time. When you cling to irritation, you drag the past into the present. A single rude remark can ruin your entire day if you replay it again and again. But by releasing it, you cut the chain. You free yourself to step into the next moment without carrying the old one behind you. Time itself becomes lighter because you are no longer filling it with recycled pain. This practice is not about indifference. It is not about pretending you do not care. On the contrary, it is about caring for the right things. If you waste your energy on every minor annoyance, you will have none left for what truly matters: your loved ones, your values, your growth. Letting go is a form of prioritizing. It says, "My peace is worth more than this irritation. My life is too short for this impatience. My attention is too precious for this trivial frustration." There is a quiet dignity in this way of living. To walk through the world unbothered by small disturbances is not coldness. It is strength. It is the strength of someone who has chosen not to be a slave to every passing emotion, who has understood that most battles are not worth fighting, and that the greatest victory is mastery over oneself. So begin where you are. The next time the coffee spills, or the line moves slowly, or someone interrupts your story, use it as practice. Take a breath, smile, even if only inwardly. Release the weight before it takes root. These small surrenders may look invisible to others, but within you, they are building something unshakable. They are building equanimity, the calm strength to meet life as it comes without being broken by it. And as you grow in this practice, you will notice something extraordinary. Life itself begins to feel lighter. Days flow with less resistance. Frustrations still come, but they no longer control you. You have learned the art of letting go in the smallest of moments, and through it, you have gained the greatest of freedoms, the freedom to live in peace, no matter what fate brings. When you begin to master the art of releasing the little irritations, life feels lighter. The noise that once ruled your mind starts to lose its grip. Yet in this newfound calm, another truth quietly reveals itself. Letting go is not only about frustrations and small annoyances. The greater challenge lies in where you choose to place your mind. It is one thing to free yourself from minor disturbances, but quite another to discipline your attention, to carefully decide what deserves your inner gaze and what does not. If life is shaped by thought, then curating where your mind rests is the most radical form of minimalism. Attention is the currency of existence. Whatever holds your attention grows stronger, more vivid, more powerful in your life. Most people spend this currency carelessly. They scatter it on endless distractions, on gossip, on the loudest headlines, on meaningless scrolling through screens. They treat their attention as if it were infinite, forgetting that every hour spent on trivialities is an hour stolen from growth, purpose, and peace. Minimalism of attention begins when you treat focus as sacred, when you see that your life is nothing but the sum of where your mind has rested. The first step is recognizing that attention is not neutral. What you consume shapes you. The Stoics warned that the mind becomes colored by the company it keeps, by the stories it entertains, by the ideas it accepts. If you constantly attend to anger, fear, or envy, these emotions carve deep grooves into your character. If you feed your mind on shallow noise, your thoughts grow shallow. But if you direct your gaze toward wisdom, courage, gratitude, or clarity, then these qualities slowly become your nature. Where your mind rests, there your soul grows. This kind of minimalism is far more difficult than cleaning a closet or giving away possessions. Objects stay where you place them, but thoughts move restlessly, always seeking the next stimulus. To simplify attention requires constant vigilance. It means asking at every moment, does this deserve space in my mind? Will this thought strengthen me, or will it drain me? Will this story nourish my character, or will it make me weaker? By filtering in this way, you begin to prune the inner clutter, leaving only what uplifts, enlightens, or strengthens. Modern life makes this practice urgent. Never before has so much noise demanded our focus. Every notification, advertisement, headline, and message is designed to pull you away from yourself. Companies fight over seconds of your attention as if it were gold, because it is. Your mind is being auctioned every day unless you reclaim it. The Stoic art of letting go now takes a new form, letting go of distractions before they take root, refusing to scatter your focus on what does not matter. The practice begins with awareness of attention leaks. Notice where your mind drifts when it is unguarded. Do you replay arguments? Do you wander through endless social feeds? Do you obsess over what others think of you? Each leak drains your energy. Just as a minimalist clears away objects that serve no purpose, you must clear away the thought habits that weaken you. This does not mean suppressing thoughts, but guiding them, like a shepherd steering a restless flock back to safe ground. Once you identify these leaks, the next step is choosing anchors for your mind. Anchors are deliberate points of focus that hold your attention in what is meaningful. It could be the present breath, the work of your hands, the words of wisdom from a book, or the person sitting across from you. Anchors are not chosen once, but daily, because attention is always tempted to wander. By repeatedly returning to your chosen anchors, you build the discipline of focus, until your mind learns where to rest. Minimalism of attention also means treating silence as nourishment. When the world is noisy, silence becomes a form of wealth. In silence, the mind reveals its clutter. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Old worries rise, memories replay, plans intrude. But if you sit with the silence, the noise slowly dissolves, leaving a deeper clarity. The Stoics valued this stillness because it allowed them to distinguish between what was within their power and what was not. Without silence, attention is always pulled outward. With silence, it can finally return inward. There is also the practice of selective ignorance. Not everything deserves your awareness. Many people believe they must know every detail of the world, every piece of gossip, every update, every scandal. But endless information is not wisdom, it is distraction. Selective ignorance means deliberately choosing not to know what does not help you live better, act justly, or grow stronger. It is saying, my attention is too precious to waste on the trivial. Marcus Aurelius himself reminded that much of what people discuss is neither true nor useful, and to guard the mind against it. This curation of attention does not make you detached from the world. It makes you more effective within it. When your mind is scattered, you cannot act with strength, but when it is focused, your actions become deliberate, sharp, powerful. Just as a magnifying glass directs sunlight into fire, focused attention transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary impact. Minimalism of attention is not withdrawal, it is concentration. It is doing fewer things with greater presence, fewer thoughts with greater depth. Consider relationships. Many conflicts come not from malice, but from divided attention. A person speaks while the other scrolls on their phone. A child seeks comfort while the parent's mind is at work. To give full attention is to give respect. To withdraw attention is to wound. Practicing minimalism here means refusing to scatter presence across screens, worries, and distractions. When you are with someone, be fully there. This is one of the greatest gifts you can offer, and it costs nothing but awareness. Attention also shapes memory. What you choose to notice becomes the story you tell about your life. Two people can live the same day. One focuses only on annoyances, the other on small blessings, and they walk away with completely different lives in their minds. Minimalism of attention means training yourself to notice what enriches rather than what depletes. You do not deny difficulties, but you refuse to give them more weight than they deserve. You choose to attend to what sustains gratitude, strength, and clarity. The practice extends into work. Most people believe productivity means doing more, but real productivity is directing attention to the few things that matter most. The Stoics valued purpose over busyness. They warned that scattering yourself across too many tasks is a kind of self-betrayal. Minimalism of attention at work means cutting away the unnecessary, the shallow meetings, the endless interruptions, so that your focus can rest fully on what aligns with your values. This way, your labor does not just fill time, it builds meaning. Another level of this discipline is emotional. Attention feeds emotions. When you dwell on anger, it grows. When you rehearse fears, they strengthen. When you attend to resentment, it deepens its roots. But when you choose to direct attention toward calm, courage, or gratitude, those emotions are fed instead. This is not denial, it is training. By curating your attention, you choose which emotions flourish inside you. Over time, you cultivate an inner garden of peace rather than a jungle of turmoil. Minimalism of attention is also about pacing life. Many people rush, filling every gap with stimulation. They fear the empty moment, but this rush dilutes attention, leaving it thin and restless. To slow down is to let attention thicken, to allow presence to deepen. Drinking tea without the phone, walking without headphones, sitting without a screen. These small acts reclaim attention from the constant hunger for distraction. They remind you that life is not found in rushing past moments, but in inhabiting them fully. The greatest obstacle is the myth that you can divide attention endlessly. Modern life glorifies multitasking, but research shows the mind cannot truly focus on more than one thing at a time. Every switch costs energy, every interruption scatters thought. Minimalism here means ruthless honesty. One task, one focus, one presence at a time. To live divided is to live half alive. To live with single-minded attention is to live wholly. Curating where your mind rests also transforms how you experience suffering. Pain, loss, and difficulty will come, but suffering intensifies when attention circles endlessly around them. By gently shifting attention toward what remains, toward lessons, toward gratitude, you lessen the weight. This does not erase pain, but it prevents pain from becoming identity. In this way, attention is the lever by which you lift yourself out of despair. The practice of minimalism in attention is not a single decision, but a lifelong discipline. Each day brings countless invitations to scatter focus. Each day you must decline most of them. Over time, you begin to feel a new kind of freedom. The world no longer controls your mind with every notification and every irritation. You hold your attention as a master holds a tool, carefully, precisely, deliberately. And with that mastery comes a quieter, deeper joy. By curating your attention, you learn the rarest form of simplicity. Not just fewer possessions, but fewer distractions. Not just a tidy home, but a clear mind. This is the Stoic art of letting go at its purest level, not clinging to every thought, not feeding every impulse, but choosing carefully where to rest the gaze of your soul. And in that choice lies the essence of freedom. When you begin to master where your attention rests, life changes shape. The noise of the world loses its power, and suddenly there is space to choose, to direct your mind toward what nourishes instead of what drains. But attention alone is not enough, because life will still hand you moments that sting, memories of mistakes, envy at what others have, disappointment when dreams collapse. The question is not whether these emotions will arise, but what you will do with them when they come. If you let them rot, they will poison you. If you learn to recycle them, they become fuel. This is the heart of amor fati, not only accepting what happens, but transforming every experience, even the painful ones, into strength. Regret is one of the heaviest weights we carry. It speaks in whispers late at night, replaying choices, showing you how life might have unfolded differently. Most people either drown in it or deny it, pretending the past never happened. But both paths waste the energy hidden inside regret. To recycle regret is to face it fully, to admit what was done, and then to ask, what is the lesson here that I can carry forward? Instead of letting the past chain you, you turn it into a teacher. Every wrong decision becomes a compass pointing you toward wiser action next time. In this way, regret is not an enemy, but a raw material, waiting to be shaped into wisdom. Jealousy is another emotion that corrodes silently. It focuses the mind on what others have, blinding you to your own blessings. Left unchecked, it breeds resentment, a restless sense of lack, an inability to feel joy in the success of others. But jealousy also contains information. It tells you what you desire, what part of you feels unfulfilled. To recycle jealousy, you must strip it of comparison and turn it inward. Why does this achievement stir me? What in my own life am I neglecting? When used in this way, jealousy no longer poisons, it awakens. It becomes a signal pointing you toward your own neglected potential. Rather than shrinking when others rise, you allow their success to light a fire under your own growth. Disappointment strikes when life refuses to match your plans. A job opportunity vanishes, a relationship breaks, an outcome does not arrive. Most people treat disappointment as proof that they have failed or that life is unfair. But disappointment is simply the gap between expectation and reality. To recycle it, you can shift your relationship to expectation itself. Ask, was my expectation aligned with reality? Did I cling to a picture that fate never promised? Amor Fati invites you to embrace what actually unfolded, not what you demanded. Disappointment then becomes a chance to refine your expectations, to release illusions, to root yourself more firmly in what is. Far from waste, disappointment can purify desire, teaching you to pursue what is within your power and release what is not. Amor Fati, love of fate, does not mean blind submission. It means choosing to see every event, even the ones you did not want, as carrying hidden value. The Stoics believed that life is a furnace, and everything that enters it, joy or pain, gain or loss, can become fuel for the fire of character. Emotional recycling is this process in action. Instead of throwing away difficult feelings, you burn them into energy. Regret becomes wisdom, jealousy becomes motivation, disappointment becomes clarity. Nothing is wasted. Everything is transformed. To live this way requires trust in the order of life. Not trust that everything will go well, but trust that whatever comes can serve your growth if you allow it. When a plan collapses, you can say, "This too belongs to my story." When envy rises, you can say, "This too can teach me." When the past haunts you, you can say, "This too will sharpen me." Amor fati is not passive acceptance, it is active transformation, a creative stance that turns the chaos of life into material for building the self. Neuroscience supports this ancient insight. Studies show that reframing emotions alters how the brain stores and uses them. When you reinterpret a painful memory not as a wound but as a lesson, your brain literally rewires, embedding resilience instead of trauma. Emotional recycling is not just philosophy, it is biology. You are sculpting your own nervous system with every act of reinterpretation. The Stoics knew this intuitively. They practiced premeditatio malorum, the rehearsal of misfortunes, so that when pain arrived, they could meet it as training rather than tragedy. A key part of this practice is writing. When regret, jealousy, or disappointment rises, writing them out allows you to see them clearly, to separate the raw emotion from the story your mind has wrapped around it. Once on the page, you can ask, "What is the use of this? What is this pointing me toward?" Over time, journaling becomes not just expression, but alchemy, turning emotional weight into insight. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations itself is a record of this process, a man recycling frustration, loneliness, and burden into wisdom. Another tool is gratitude. Gratitude does not erase regret or jealousy, but it dilutes their poison. When you balance a disappointment against what remains, the wound shrinks in scale. When you notice what you already have, jealousy loses its grip. Gratitude does not deny pain, it contextualizes it. It reminds you that no single event defines life, that alongside loss, there is always some form of abundance. Gratitude, practiced daily, is one of the strongest ways to recycle heavy emotions into lighter states of being. But perhaps the most powerful practice of amor fati is learning to love even the emotions themselves. To love regret for its honesty, to love jealousy for its fire, to love disappointment for its humbling power. This may sound strange, but love is the ultimate recycler. When you embrace an emotion, you stop resisting it, and in that acceptance, it softens. The energy that was trapped in struggle is released, free to be used for growth. This is why the Stoics spoke not of tolerating fate, but of loving it. To love your fate is to embrace every part of yourself that fate awakens, even the uncomfortable ones, and to trust that they too serve your becoming. Practical exercises make this real. When regret surfaces, instead of drowning in "if only," you can deliberately name one lesson that regret has taught you and commit to applying it. When jealousy stirs, you can identify one action that brings you closer to the quality you envy, turning it into constructive energy. When disappointment bites, you can list what remains possible, redirecting focus to the door that is still open. These are small acts, but repeated, they transform the inner landscape. Over time, you begin to notice a shift. Where once emotions trapped you, now they feed you. Where once regret meant paralysis, now it sharpens your decision-making. Where once jealousy corroded, now it sparks creative drive. Where once disappointment crushed, now it grounds you in reality. This is not because life has become easier, but because you have become wiser. You have trained the art of recycling. This practice extends beyond the individual. In relationships, recycling emotions prevents projection. Instead of unloading regret on others, you process it into insight. Instead of letting jealousy poison trust, you use it to explore your own needs honestly. Instead of letting disappointment turn into bitterness, you share it with humility, allowing connection rather than withdrawal. Emotional recycling makes you not only stronger, but gentler, less of a burden to those around you. Even larger experiences, grief, failure, betrayal, can be approached this way. These are not small irritations, but deep wounds. Yet the principle remains. Within every wound lies potential. Some of the most compassionate, wise, and resilient people are those who have learned to recycle immense suffering into service, into art, into love. They do not erase the pain, but they refuse to let it go to waste. They carry it as fuel, not as chains. The beauty of amor fati is that it makes life whole. Nothing is excluded, nothing is wasted. Joy is welcomed, but so is sorrow. Success is celebrated, but so is failure. Every moment, pleasant or painful, is woven into the same fabric, and all of it is loved. This attitude dissolves the fear of the future, because whatever comes can be used. It dissolves bitterness about the past, because even mistakes serve a purpose. It dissolves envy, because others' paths can inspire rather than diminish. To love fate is to step into a state of radical acceptance, where everything feeds growth. This does not mean life becomes easy. Emotions will still arise with force. Regret will still sting. Jealousy will still burn. Disappointment will still ache. But instead of being ruled by them, you will know what to do with them. You will know how to turn them into fuel. Like a blacksmith, you take the raw, heavy iron of emotion and forge it into tools for living. And the more you practice, the more unbreakable you become. In the end, amor fati and emotional recycling are not about changing life, but about changing how you meet life. Regret no longer imprisons you. Jealousy no longer poisons you. Disappointment no longer breaks you. Every emotion, every event, every fate becomes material for strength. This is how the Stoic art of letting go deepens, not by discarding emotions, but by transforming them, not by denying fate, but by loving it. And when you learn this, you discover that nothing is wasted, because everything, even your heaviest feelings, can become part of the fire that keeps you alive, strong, and free. When every emotion becomes fuel instead of waste, something profound begins to shift. You no longer fear regret, jealousy, or disappointment, because each one can be used to strengthen you. But there is another, subtler weight that often goes unnoticed. It is not the pain of emotion, but the burden of identity. Over the years, people gather labels and roles the way travelers gather souvenirs. Some picked up willingly, others handed to us without asking. We carry titles, professions, family roles, social masks, and expectations as if they define who we are. Slowly, the self becomes buried beneath layers that do not truly belong to us. The Stoic path of minimalism is not only about possessions or attention, it is also about stripping away the excess identities that cloud our essence. Every person is born simple. At the beginning, you are nothing but a living being, breathing and present. Yet as you grow, society begins to assign names and categories: student, athlete, worker, parent, leader, success, failure. These identities are not inherently harmful, but when clung to too tightly, they become cages. The problem is not having roles, but believing that you are only those roles. The Stoics reminded that you are first and foremost a rational soul, a fragment of the larger whole, before you are any title the world places on you. To forget this is to live enslaved by masks. Career is often the loudest mask. People define themselves by what they do, not by who they are. I am a lawyer. I am a teacher. I am an entrepreneur. Yet what happens when the career ends, when retirement comes, or when failure strikes? If the entire identity rests on that role, collapse follows. The Stoic practice here is to treat career as a function, not as essence. You may work as a builder or a writer, but beneath that, you remain a human soul capable of reason, virtue, and love. The role may change 100 times in life, but the core remains constant. By shedding excess identification with profession, you gain freedom to adapt without losing yourself. Social roles are another heavy layer. Society tells you what a good parent, friend, or citizen should look like. Many people spend their lives trying to meet expectations set by culture rather than by conscience. The Stoics, however, taught that your first duty is to live in harmony with nature and reason, not with the shifting opinions of the crowd. To be a parent is real, to be a friend is real, but the expectations of perfection, of never failing, of always pleasing, are illusions. Shedding these layers means releasing the performance and focusing instead on the substance: care, justice, honesty. The labels matter less than the virtues expressed through them. The ego itself creates another form of excess. It builds masks to protect, to impress, to hide. People wear the mask of toughness when they feel fragile, the mask of superiority when they feel insecure, the mask of wisdom when they fear ignorance. But the masks consume energy. They create distance between the true self and the outer world. The Stoic minimalism of identity is about daring to remove these masks, even if only within yourself. To admit weakness, to acknowledge ignorance, to be authentic without fear, this is not loss, but liberation. You strip away what is false, and what remains is something stronger than any mask: truth. Another layer to examine is reputation. Humans crave approval and dread disapproval. Entire lives are bent toward building an image in the eyes of others, yet reputation is fragile, dependent on opinions that shift with time and fashion. The Stoics warned not to place identity in what others think, because this is to hand your soul to strangers. By shedding dependence on reputation, you reclaim your freedom. Praise may come, criticism may come, but neither touches who you truly are. To live this way is to be rooted in something deeper than applause, the integrity of your own actions. The attachment to personal history also becomes a form of identity clutter. People cling to stories of who they were: the achiever, the victim, the hero, the failure. These stories become heavy, shaping every decision, limiting every possibility. But the Stoics urged living in the present moment, where the past cannot bind you. You are not the sum of your old stories. You are the choices you make now, the virtues you embody now. Minimalism of identity means loosening the grip on your own narrative, allowing yourself to grow beyond the past rather than being defined by it. National, cultural, or group identities can also weigh heavily. Pride in belonging is natural, but when identity is reduced only to group labels, division and hostility follow. The Stoics taught that we are citizens of the world, parts of the same human family. This broader identity transcends nationality, tribe, or faction. To simplify identity here means to see yourself not as confined by borders or groups, but as a participant in the shared human experience. This wider view dissolves unnecessary hostility and creates space for empathy. A subtle but powerful layer of identity is the pursuit of success. Many define themselves by achievements, possessions, or status. I am successful because I own this. I matter because I won that. But success tied to external measures is always unstable because it rests on circumstances beyond control. The Stoics insisted that true success is internal, living with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Everything else is decoration. When you shed the identity of external achievement, you begin to see success as a way of being rather than a collection of trophies. This shift transforms ambition into a calmer pursuit of virtue. Even suffering can become an identity. Some wear their wounds as proof of who they are, repeating stories of betrayal or loss until they become inseparable from pain. But identity built on suffering traps the soul in endless repetition. Minimalism here means honoring pain without turning it into a permanent mask. You can acknowledge hurt while also allowing healing. You can carry lessons without carrying the identity of victimhood. This does not erase suffering, but places it in its rightful place, as experience, not essence. Spiritual labels are another subtle form of excess. People often cling to religious, philosophical, or ideological identities as shields. They declare themselves Stoic, Christian, Buddhist, or skeptic, and then defend the label more than they live the practice. The danger is in mistaking the name for the substance. The Stoics themselves warned against this, emphasizing that philosophy is not a badge, but a way of life. Minimalism of identity here means valuing practice over label, substance over appearance. By stripping away these excess identities, life becomes lighter. You no longer fear losing a role because you know you are more than that role. You no longer feel crushed by expectations because you live by principles rather than performances. You no longer need constant approval because you rest in integrity. This simplicity of identity brings stability. When storms come, you are not thrown into crisis because you were never clinging to masks in the first place. The process of shedding is not easy. Each identity has roots tied to pride, fear, or habit. To let go feels like losing part of yourself. But what you lose is false weight. What remains is clarity. You discover that at your core, beneath titles and masks, you are simply a human soul with the capacity for reason, love, and virtue. This essence needs no decoration. It is enough. Practical exercises can help this shedding. One is to ask daily, who would I be without my roles, my titles, my possessions? Another is to reflect, which identities bring me closer to virtue and which ones only feed my ego? By questioning in this way, you separate what is essential from what is excess. Another practice is to face change deliberately. Take time away from roles, from labels, and notice that you still exist without them. The soul does not vanish when the masks fall. Living with a minimalist identity also strengthens relationships. When you no longer cling to roles, you can meet others as they are, not as labels. You see your child not as extension of me, but as an independent soul. You see your partner not as provider or support, but as a fellow human walking alongside you. Stripping identity allows deeper connection because it removes the barriers of performance and expectation. In the end, the Stoic minimalism of identity is about finding stability in what cannot be taken away. Careers end, roles change, reputations fade, masks fall, successes vanish, groups dissolve, suffering passes. But what remains is the essence, a soul capable of reason and virtue. To live rooted in that essence is to live free. You do not need to be many things to many people. You do not need to guard masks or chase applause. You need only to live as your true self, simple and unadorned. This is not loss, but gain, the gain of a self that is lighter, truer, and unshakable. When the masks of identity fall away, what remains is a lighter, truer self. You begin to realize that the essence of life is not in being many things, but in being authentic, steady, and whole. Yet once you shed these excess roles, another question rises. What do you truly need to live well? For many, the answer is endless. More money, more possessions, more recognition, more comfort. But the Stoics saw clearly that this hunger creates its own prison. The craving for more is endless, and the soul becomes restless, chasing it. True wealth is not found in accumulation, but in the rare freedom of needing less. This is not deprivation, but a deeper luxury, a quiet opulence that cannot be bought or taken away. Need is often misunderstood. Most people confuse needs with wants, and wants with necessities. To live in luxury in the Stoic sense means learning the difference. Food, shelter, warmth, these are needs. A bigger house, a richer meal, a softer bed, these are desires dressed as needs. The more desires you collect, the poorer you become, because your peace depends on circumstances outside your control. The fewer desires you cling to, the richer you become, because you can be content anywhere, with anything, in any condition. Seneca reminded his students that poverty is not having too little, but desiring too much. By this measure, many of the wealthiest are actually impoverished, and many with little are rich beyond measure. The luxury of needing less appears first in daily life. A person who always craves more suffers endlessly because life rarely delivers everything they demand. A person who is content with what is present rests in calm because their peace is not dependent on constant gain. This calm is not dullness, it is freedom. When you can sit in a simple room, eat a simple meal, wear simple clothes and still feel whole, then no force in the world can enslave you. Even kings and emperors, bound by their endless appetites, lack such wealth. Minimalism in possessions is only the beginning. The real luxury of needing less is internal. When you no longer crave constant approval, you are free from the exhausting chase for validation. When you no longer hunger for endless comfort, you are free from fear of discomfort. When you no longer seek recognition in every action, you are free to act with integrity rather than performance. The fewer cravings you bow to, the more room you have for stillness, for clarity, for joy. This is why the Stoics practiced voluntary simplicity, training themselves to go without, so they could discover how little was truly required for happiness. Consider the pursuit of wealth. For many, money is not about survival, but about identity. It becomes a measure of success, a mask of worth. Yet the more one gains, the more one fears loss, the more one craves increase, the more one compares against others. This is not luxury, it is slavery. The Stoic approach was to use wealth if it comes, but never depend on it. The true luxury is to eat with gratitude, whether at a banquet or at a bare table, to rest with peace, whether in silk or in rough cloth. To be satisfied with little is to have found the greatest wealth of all. Freedom from craving also reshapes time. Many people fill their days with restless activity, chasing desires they never truly need. They sacrifice presence for the promise of more, never realizing that life itself is slipping by. The luxury of needing less means reclaiming time. When you no longer fill your schedule with pursuits driven by vanity or excess desire, you create space for silence, for reflection, for relationships, for joy. Time becomes abundant, not by adding hours, but by removing needless wants. This freedom is not cold detachment. It does not mean rejecting beauty, comfort, or success when they arrive. It means enjoying them without being enslaved by them, to drink wine without needing it, to rest in a fine house without clinging to it, to wear fine clothes without believing they define you. This is the balance. Luxury without attachment, pleasure without dependence. When fate removes them, you remain whole. When fate provides them, you enjoy them fully, but lightly. There is also the luxury of mental simplicity. Many minds are crowded with cravings for recognition, arguments to win, comparisons to make. To need less means to release these mental burdens. You no longer waste energy on envy, on constant proving, on endless ambition. Instead, your mind becomes clear, spacious, uncluttered. You can direct thought toward what matters: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. This clarity itself is a form of wealth greater than gold, because it allows you to live without the constant drain of wanting. In relationships, needing less means giving more. When you no longer demand that others meet your every expectation, you become easier to love and more capable of love. You do not cling to people as possessions, nor suffocate them with demands. You can appreciate them as they are, free to come and go, without fear that your happiness depends on their constant presence. The Stoics valued friendship deeply, but they did not treat friends as necessities for survival. They saw them as blessings to be cherished without clinging. This freedom strengthens bonds rather than weakens them, because relationships are no longer weighed down by endless demands. The luxury of needing less is also preparation for loss. Everything external is borrowed: health, youth, possessions, even loved ones. To cling to them as permanent is to set yourself up for constant grief. By practicing contentment with less, you train the soul to accept loss without collapse. When death takes what is dear, you grieve as a human, but you are not destroyed, because your peace was never built on the illusion of permanence. To love fully while knowing you can live without is the deepest strength. Society often glorifies abundance: bigger houses, faster cars, endless choices. Yet abundance without simplicity leads to emptiness. A person can drown in possessions and still feel poor inside. The Stoic measure of wealth was never how much one had, but how little one needed. A man who can feast on bread and water with gratitude is wealthier than one who resents a banquet for lacking some delicacy. The luxury of needing less overturns society's values. It redefines success not as accumulation, but as sufficiency, not as craving more, but as craving nothing unnecessary. This way of living does not kill ambition, it refines it. Instead of chasing endless possessions or status, ambition becomes directed toward virtue, wisdom, and contribution. You no longer spend energy feeding endless cravings, so you have energy for building character, serving others, pursuing meaning. Minimalism here becomes abundance, because every resource once wasted on craving is freed for what truly enriches life. The practice can be strengthened through exercises. Spend a day living with less comfort than usual, eat simple food, wear plain clothes, sleep on the floor. Notice that you survive, that peace is untouched, that perhaps you even feel lighter. This was Seneca's practice. He lived for short periods in voluntary poverty to remind himself that comfort is pleasant, but not necessary. Another exercise is to reflect daily on sufficiency. Ask yourself not, "What do I lack?" but "What do I already have that is enough?" This shift trains the mind to see abundance in simplicity. The deeper insight of this practice is that true luxury lies in independence. To need little is to be unconquerable. No thief can steal your peace, no loss can shatter your core, no market crash can bankrupt your soul. The fewer your cravings, the more unshakable your freedom. You walk through life lightly, unburdened, grateful, whole. This is a wealth greater than riches, the wealth of not needing what the world insists you must have. The luxury of needing less is not an escape from life, but a richer embrace of it. When cravings fall silent, what remains is the ability to savor the simplest joys fully. A drink of water becomes sweet. A quiet walk becomes profound. A small act of kindness becomes treasure. You discover that luxury is not in excess, but in presence, not in more, but in enough. This is not deprivation. It is the richest form of abundance, the freedom of a soul that has learned that less is not lack, but liberation. When the craving for more loosens its grip, life opens in unexpected ways. The quiet wealth of needing less is not only about possessions, recognition, or comfort. It touches something even deeper: time itself. People who are enslaved by endless desires spend their days grasping for moments that never arrive or mourning those that have already passed. They scatter their attention across past and future, while the present slips through unnoticed. Once you learn to embrace simplicity, the next step is to simplify your relationship with time. This is where amor fati becomes radical. It is not just about accepting events, but about releasing the constant struggle against yesterday and tomorrow and resting fully in the now. Time is the most precious resource we have, yet most live as if it were endless. Days are wasted in regret for what cannot be changed, or in anxiety about futures that may never come. Regret says, "If only I had chosen differently." Anxiety whispers, "What if tomorrow goes wrong?" Both voices steal from the present, which is the only space where action and life actually happen. The Stoic practice of amor fati interrupts this cycle. To love your fate is to love this moment exactly as it arrives, not an edited version of it, not the fantasy of how it could have been. It is radical because it demands you stop bargaining with time, stop negotiating with reality, and start living it directly. The obsession with an alternate past is one of the greatest thieves of life. People replay conversations, failures, mistakes, as if by reliving them they could undo them. But the past is fixed. It does not bend to desire. To hold on is to carry a ghost that weighs heavier each day. Amor fati transforms regret into acceptance, by asking a simple question. If this event was necessary to bring me to this moment, can I choose to love it as part of my story? In this way, even pain becomes part of the whole you embrace, and time's irreversible nature becomes less of a burden and more of a gift. The same is true of the future. Many live not in today, but in endless rehearsals of tomorrow. They plan, they worry, they dream, but often these thoughts are not grounded in action. They are distractions from the present. Anxiety over the future is nothing more than imagination turned against you. By practicing amor fati, you recognize that the future is not yours yet. You can prepare wisely, but you cannot live there. Radical time minimalism means refusing to let the not yet consume the only reality you possess, the now. This discipline reshapes how you see each day. Instead of asking whether today is perfect, you ask whether you are willing to meet today as it is, with open arms. Marcus Aurelius wrote that every morning he reminded himself of the challenges ahead, not to dread them, but to accept them as part of the day's natural design. This mindset frees you from the exhausting effort of resisting what comes. Each event, pleasant or unpleasant, becomes part of the tapestry you are called to love. To wake up and say, "Yes, this too is mine," is the essence of amor fati applied to time. Time minimalism also exposes how much energy is wasted on waiting. People often postpone living, saying, "I will be happy when I retire, when I succeed, when I am loved, when I am free." Life is pushed into the future as if happiness were always somewhere else. The Stoics saw the danger in this postponement. Tomorrow is not promised. The only time to live is today. Amor fati teaches that even if conditions never change, you can still embrace what is before you. To wait endlessly for a better time is to abandon the only time you have. Radical minimalism of time means refusing to wait for life to begin. It means beginning now. Another element of this practice is releasing the obsession with control. Much of time anxiety comes from trying to bend events to fit your will. You create detailed visions of how things must unfold, and when they do not, disappointment floods in. By contrast, amor fati says, "Let events come as they will, and I will shape my response." This shift reduces wasted time and energy. Instead of fighting reality, you flow with it. You still act with intention, but you no longer believe that time itself must obey you. This makes life lighter because you no longer resist the inevitable flow of change. Radical time minimalism also affects relationships. Many conflicts arise from clinging to how someone used to be or worrying about how they may act tomorrow. But the person before you now is who they are in this moment. To love fate is to love them as they stand, not as memory or as fantasy. This allows for more genuine connection because you are no longer speaking to a version of someone who does not exist. You are present, and presence is the foundation of intimacy. The practice is also essential in facing mortality. Death is the ultimate boundary of time, and fear of it often drives the frantic grasping at past and future. People try to outpace death by holding on to memories or planning for legacies. But in doing so, they forget to live while alive. The Stoics turned toward death as a teacher. By remembering its inevitability, they treasured each day. Amor fati deepens this lesson. Death, too, is part of fate to be loved, not feared. By embracing it, you stop fleeing from time's limit and instead fill your days with presence. Every hour becomes richer when you no longer try to stretch time beyond what nature gives. Practical exercises help anchor this approach. When regret surfaces, pause and ask, can I treat this as a necessary part of my path? When anxiety about the future arises, redirect by asking, what action can I take now that aligns with my values? If no action exists, release it as wasted energy. Another exercise is daily reflection. At the close of each day, write not about what could have been different, but about how the day, exactly as it was, carried lessons, gifts, or opportunities. Over time, this retrains the mind to see the present not as lacking, but as complete. There is also value in deliberately slowing down. Modern culture worships speed, faster responses, quicker results, constant acceleration. But speed often hides an inability to face the present. Radical time minimalism invites you to pause, to taste moments fully rather than rushing through them. Drinking tea slowly, listening without distraction, walking without destination. These are acts of rebellion against time anxiety. They show that richness of life is not in how much you do, but in how fully you experience what you do. This approach to time also protects against burnout. Many people exhaust themselves by living either in guilt over the past or pressure for the future. They rarely allow themselves rest, because rest feels like falling behind. But when you embrace amor fati, you see rest itself as part of the unfolding of fate. A quiet afternoon, a simple breath, a night of sleep. These are not wasted, they are essential. To love fate includes loving the pauses, not only the progress. This recognition prevents the endless race that drains life of joy. Perhaps the deepest benefit of this practice is the peace it brings. When you stop wrestling with time, you discover a serenity that possessions, status, or power cannot give. You are no longer chasing what is gone or grasping for what is not yet here. You stand fully in the present, grounded and unshaken. This is not passivity, it is strength. You act, you decide, you strive, but always from the ground of acceptance, never from the panic of resistance. This balance creates a life both purposeful and peaceful, a rare combination. In the end, amor fati as radical time minimalism is about liberation. Liberation from regret's chains, from anxiety's grip, from the endless bargaining with reality. It is about seeing that the only time you ever truly hold is now, and that now, however it arrives, is worthy of love. To live this way is to discover a richness that no possession can equal, a freedom that no power can give, and a peace that no future can promise. This is the rarest luxury, not needing a different past or a different future, but embracing the fullness of this moment as your fate and loving it completely. When the grip of time loosens and you learn to meet each moment without clinging to the past or grasping at the future, you begin to see that everything given to you by life carries the same principle. Nothing is fully yours to keep, not even your own body. The Stoics were clear on this point. The body is not a possession in the absolute sense, but a loan from fate, entrusted to you for a time and eventually reclaimed. This understanding changes everything about how you relate to yourself, your health, and even the physical objects that surround you. If life itself is temporary, then how much more fleeting are the things you call mine? By seeing the body as borrowed, you free yourself from the restless consumerist drive to decorate, indulge, or cling to it beyond measure. To view the body as a loan is to accept it with gratitude, but without ownership. You did not design its form, you did not choose its strengths, and you cannot prevent its eventual decline. What you can do is care for it wisely, as one cares for something entrusted. This is why the Stoics spoke of stewardship rather than possession. Health is to be maintained not because youth or beauty is eternal, but because a well-functioning body allows the soul to practice virtue more fully. The focus is not vanity, but utility. By remembering that your body is temporary, you can appreciate it without obsession and care for it without despair when it changes. Consumer culture feeds on the illusion of permanence. It whispers that with the right product, the right look, the right possession, you can preserve youth or extend pleasure indefinitely. But this is a denial of nature. The Stoic view cuts through this illusion by placing the body within the cycle of fate. Wrinkles, illness, weakness, and eventually death are not failures. They are the natural repayment of the loan. By embracing this truth, you step outside the endless race to resist what cannot be resisted. Freedom arises not in fighting decay, but in living well while you can, with what you have, in the state you are given. Minimalism of the body also means releasing identification with appearance. Many people equate worth with beauty or physical perfection. When the mirror changes, their sense of self collapses. But if the body is alone, then appearance is merely its outer form, not its essence. The Stoics valued discipline of the character far above symmetry of the face. They saw physical beauty as indifferent, neither good nor bad in itself, while virtue remained the only true good. To internalize this is to shift from endless self-comparison toward self-mastery. By releasing attachment to appearance, you stop living as a product and start living as a person. Another part of this perspective is the relationship between the body and possessions. Consumerism often treats the body as a stage on which to display wealth, clothes, jewelry, devices, enhancements. But if the body itself is not truly yours, how much less the objects draped upon it? The Stoics advised simplicity in possessions, not because they hated beauty, but because they understood that indulgence enslaves. The more you depend on external adornments to feel whole, the more fragile your peace becomes. The minimalist body is clothed in sufficiency, enough to protect, enough to serve, but never so much that possessions become a chain. This approach does not mean neglect or self-punishment. The Stoics valued health and strength because the body is the tool through which virtue acts in the world. They practiced moderation in food, in drink, in exercise, recognizing that excess weakens as much as deprivation. The body should be treated as an instrument to be tuned, not an idol to be worshipped or an enemy to be abused. By living with balance, you honor the loan you have been given while never mistaking it for your eternal self. Detachment from the body also changes how you view pain and illness. For most, these experiences feel like theft, life stealing from their possessions. But if the body is not fully yours, then pain is part of the terms of the loan. This does not make suffering pleasant, but it reframes it as natural, even expected. Epictetus, who lived with physical disability, taught that you cannot control the body's condition, only your response to it. By releasing the belief that perfect health is owed to you, you can meet pain with resilience instead of bitterness. The minimalist body accepts discomfort without despair, recognizing that the soul remains free even when the body falters. Consumerism thrives on fear of loss, loss of youth, loss of strength, loss of attractiveness. It offers endless products as shields against time. But the Stoic practice dissolves this fear by confronting loss directly. If the body is borrowed, then its return is inevitable. Accepting this truth eliminates the desperation that fuels overconsumption. You no longer need to chase every promise of preservation, because you know that what is meant to pass will pass. The energy once wasted on resisting nature can then be devoted to living fully, to cultivating character, to strengthening relationships. Minimalism of the body extends into how you experience pleasure. Many believe the body exists to be indulged endlessly through food, luxury, sex, entertainment. But indulgence beyond measure makes the body a tyrant, demanding more each time. The Stoics warned that unchecked pleasure enslaves, creating dependence on conditions you cannot control. By practicing moderation, you discover that simple pleasures are richer than excess. A plain meal eaten with gratitude brings more peace than a feast consumed in restless craving. This is not denial, but refinement, turning the body into a servant of the soul rather than its master. There is also a social dimension to this view. When people see the body as possession, they compare endlessly, ranking themselves against others in beauty, strength, or wealth. This comparison breeds envy, pride, and insecurity. But when you understand the body as a loan, comparison loses its meaning. Each body is simply a different gift from fate, with its own limits and strengths. To compare is as foolish as envying the shape of another's shadow. This frees you from the exhausting cycle of measuring worth by externals and invites you to focus on what is within your control: your choices, your virtues, your attitude. The Stoics also practiced exercises to remind themselves of the body's temporary nature. They reflected on mortality, on illness, on the fragility of flesh. Far from being morbid, this meditation liberated them from fear. By remembering that the body could be taken at any time, they valued it more deeply while never confusing it for their essence. Every breath, every step, every heartbeat became a reminder to use the loan wisely. This is minimalist living at its core, stripping away illusions and meeting reality as it is. This philosophy has profound consequences for modern life. In a culture that constantly markets new ways to decorate, preserve, and extend the body, choosing to live with less attachment is a radical act. It means stepping outside the cycle of consumer desire, refusing to let companies dictate your sense of worth, refusing to waste life chasing illusions of permanence. It means reclaiming your freedom to live simply, to care for the body without being enslaved by it, to use it as a tool for virtue rather than a canvas for status. The minimalist body is not about rejecting physicality. It is about right relationship. You nourish it without excess, clothe it without vanity, exercise it without obsession, accept its pains without collapse. You recognize that one day it will be reclaimed, and so you use it well while it is yours. This perspective brings gratitude instead of resentment, clarity instead of confusion, freedom instead of slavery. To see the body as a loan from fate is to walk lightly in the world, unburdened by consumerist attachment, able to meet change with peace and decline with dignity. In the end, the minimalist body reminds you of the larger truth. Nothing external is truly yours, not possessions, not appearances, not even the flesh you inhabit. All is temporary, all is borrowed, all will return to the whole from which it came. The wealth of life lies not in clinging, but in using what you have with wisdom. When you live this way, every breath becomes a gift, every step an act of gratitude, every moment an opportunity to honor the loan with virtue. And when the time comes to return it, you can do so freely, knowing that you lived not as a hoarder of possessions, but as a steward of what was given. When you begin to see the body as a loan from fate, cared for but never owned, it naturally leads to a deeper truth that underlies all things. Nothing you touch, nothing you see, nothing you hold will last forever. If even your own flesh, the most personal possession you believe you have, is temporary, then what of everything else in life? To accept impermanence is not to fall into despair, but to awaken to the true rhythm of existence. In this rhythm, loss and change are not enemies. They are the very teachers that refine your ability to let go. Impermanence is not an idea, but a constant fact woven into every corner of life. The seasons shift, flowers bloom and wither, days turn to nights, and every breath you take disappears the moment after it enters. Yet most people live as if permanence were possible. They cling to possessions, relationships, achievements, and even youth, hoping to freeze them against the flow of time. This denial breeds suffering, because the current of impermanence always moves forward. The Stoic practice was to face it directly, to welcome change as the most faithful companion of life, and to learn from it how to loosen the grip of attachment. Mortality meditation was one of their most powerful tools. By reflecting daily on the certainty of death, not with morbidity, but with clarity, they trained themselves to live with urgency and gratitude. To remember that this day could be your last is to stop postponing life for some distant future. It strips away trivial concerns and makes space for what matters most. You stop wasting time on endless arguments, shallow desires, and meaningless distractions because you see how precious each hour is. Death, instead of being feared, becomes a mentor reminding you to live fully in the present. Seasonal cycles offer another lesson. Nothing in nature resists change, yet everything fulfills its purpose. Trees release their leaves, rivers swell and recede. The earth freezes and thaws. Each cycle teaches the wisdom of release. Holding on to leaves in winter would destroy the tree. Letting go makes room for new growth. Human life follows the same pattern. Childhood fades into adulthood. Strength gives way to age. Relationships begin and end. By observing nature, the Stoics learned to flow with these shifts instead of clinging. Just as the seasons are beautiful in their impermanence, so are the stages of human life. Decay is also a teacher. We often recoil from it, hiding signs of wear, avoiding reminders of decline. Yet decay reveals truth. All things are temporary. The Stoics urged reflection on decaying fruit, fading flowers, or even the aging body, not to cultivate sadness, but to strip away illusion. To see the beauty in what is passing is to accept reality without disguise. A crumbling wall, a wrinkled face, or a withered leaf is not a failure. It is nature at work. By practicing acceptance of decay, you prepare yourself for the greater losses that life will bring, meeting them with grace rather than fear. Impermanence teaches you to value what you have while you have it. A loved one's voice, a meal with friends, a walk under the sun. Each moment is unique and unrepeatable. To see it as fleeting is to savor it more deeply. Many people miss the richness of life because they assume it will always be there. By remembering that nothing is guaranteed, you heighten appreciation. Gratitude expands, not because life becomes longer or more abundant, but because you finally notice what is present before it disappears. The lesson of impermanence also reshapes relationships. Attachment often breeds suffering because we cling as if people will never change, never leave, never die. But all relationships shift. Friends move away, children grow, partners evolve, and eventually all part. By facing this truth, you learn to love more freely without suffocating grasp. You stop demanding permanence and start cherishing presence. Instead of clinging in fear, you open your hands in gratitude for the time you share. This does not weaken love. It strengthens it because it is rooted in reality rather than illusion. Impermanence also dismantles the ego. The self you cling to today will not be the same tomorrow. Your preferences, beliefs, skills, and even appearance are constantly evolving. To hold tightly to a fixed identity is to fight against life itself. By practicing impermanence, you loosen the grip on the ego and allow yourself to grow. You become less defensive, less obsessed with preserving a static image, and more open to transformation. The Stoics understood this as aligning with nature. Since change is the law of the universe, wisdom lies in adapting gracefully. Another lesson comes from the impermanence of pain. When hardship strikes, it feels eternal, but nothing endures unchanged. By remembering that suffering too is temporary, you gain resilience. The Stoics taught that pain, no matter how intense, is limited in duration. Whether it ends quickly or eventually through death, it will not last forever. This perspective allows you to bear hardship with patience, knowing that time itself will shift the weight. Impermanence is a comfort here, reminding you that even the darkest night gives way to dawn. Impermanence also transforms ambition. Many pursue goals with the belief that once achieved, happiness will be permanent. Yet every milestone fades, every triumph loses its shine. If you chase permanence through success, you will never arrive. But if you understand impermanence, you approach ambition differently. You pursue excellence not for eternal satisfaction, but for the virtue of the effort itself. You enjoy the process, knowing the outcome will pass. This frees you from disappointment when victories fade, because you never expected them to last forever. Material possessions are another field where impermanence instructs. Every object wears down, breaks, or disappears. To cling to possessions as eternal sources of happiness is to set yourself up for loss. The Stoic approach is to use possessions with care, but hold them lightly. A broken cup, they said, should remind you that everything is fragile. If you remember this, you enjoy things while they last, without despair when they are gone. Minimalism here is not austerity, but wisdom, needing less because you know nothing endures. Impermanence even reshapes how you see success and failure. Neither lasts. Today's victory may turn to tomorrow's irrelevance, and today's defeat may lead to tomorrow's wisdom. By holding both lightly, you prevent arrogance from swelling in triumph and despair from sinking you in loss. Everything is transient, and this perspective keeps you balanced. Life becomes less about clinging to outcomes and more about practicing virtue regardless of circumstance. To practice impermanence, you can begin with daily reflections. In the morning, remind yourself that the day will end, that every encounter is unique, that even your own thoughts and feelings will shift. At night, reflect on how much has already passed, how moments you thought permanent dissolved quietly. This repetition builds awareness until impermanence becomes second nature, no longer frightening, but freeing. You learn to walk through life with open hands, ready to receive and ready to release. Art, too, can be a teacher. The Japanese practice of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, honors impermanence by highlighting cracks instead of hiding them. The Stoic heart resonates with this idea that change, breakage, and repair are not flaws, but part of beauty. To see imperfection as natural is to free yourself from the illusion that life must remain untouched to be valuable. By practicing this, You align with the truth that nothing is static and everything is precious in its passing form. Impermanence also brings humility. When you know that your body, possessions, relationships, and achievements will fade, pride softens. You no longer build castles on sand. Instead, you focus on cultivating virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, because these qualities, though expressed through fleeting life, shape the way you move through impermanence itself. Virtue does not make you eternal, but it gives meaning to the temporary. It is the one wealth that cannot be lost through the passing of time because it belongs to the soul's character, not to external conditions. Facing impermanence also dissolves fear of change. Many resist transitions because they cling to what is familiar. Yet every new stage in life requires release. By practicing impermanence, you step into change with courage, knowing it is the natural order. Childhood gives way to adulthood, work gives way to rest, youth gives way to age. Instead of mourning what leaves, you can celebrate what arrives. Impermanence then becomes not a threat, but a rhythm, guiding you into new forms of growth. The ultimate lesson of impermanence is liberation. When you no longer cling to what must pass, you are free to love more deeply, to act more bravely, to live more fully. You stop hoarding moments as if they can be stored, and instead you pour yourself into them while they exist. Every breath becomes a miracle, every smile a treasure, every sorrow a teacher. To practice impermanence is to embrace life as a flowing river, never the same twice, yet always whole. This is why impermanence is the ultimate minimalist teacher. It strips away illusion, reveals what truly matters, and trains you to let go with grace. When impermanence becomes your teacher, you begin to let go more easily, not only of possessions and roles, but also of illusions that words often create. So much of what weighs on the mind comes not from external loss, but from careless speech. Arguments that never needed to happen, promises that were never possible, gossip that poisoned peace. If everything passes, why add unnecessary noise through words that do not serve? The Stoics understood that the tongue could clutter the soul more than any possession. To live simply also means to speak simply, and in learning to prune your words, you learn to prune the inner chaos that speech so often unleashes. Speech carries enormous power. Words can wound or heal, confuse or clarify, burden or lighten. Yet most people treat speech as casual, pouring out thoughts without discipline. This is not harmless, for every careless word stirs emotions, plants impressions, and feeds patterns in the mind. When speech is excessive, the mind becomes restless. When speech is restrained and intentional, the mind grows calmer. The Stoic practice of minimalism in speech is therefore not silence for its own sake, but a deliberate choice to let words serve wisdom rather than vanity. One of the first principles of this discipline is necessity. Ask before speaking, does this need to be said? Much of daily conversation is filled with words that add no value. Complaints repeated endlessly, judgments spoken without thought, chatter that fills silence but empties meaning. By choosing only what is necessary, you strip conversation of clutter. Necessary words are not always pleasant, but they are useful. They reveal truth. They guide action. They nurture understanding. When you train yourself to separate necessity from noise, your speech becomes weighty, carrying strength rather than scattering energy. Minimalism in speech also means honesty. The more lies or half-truths you speak, the more tangled your life becomes. Deception breeds anxiety because you must remember your fabrications and guard them. Simplicity dissolves this by anchoring your words in truth. The Stoics valued straightforwardness, speaking clearly without exaggeration or manipulation. This kind of honesty prunes chaos at its root. A truthful life requires fewer words to defend itself because truth stands without decoration. To say less but say it with sincerity is to live more lightly, both in speech and in conscience. Another aspect is restraint in judgment. Many waste words on gossip, criticism, or endless commentary on the lives of others. This habit not only harms those spoken of, but also poisons the speaker. The Stoics taught that much of what people discuss, rumors, scandals, opinions, is neither useful nor within one's control. To engage in such talk is to fill the mind with clutter. By practicing restraint, you conserve energy for what truly matters. You also cultivate peace in relationships because you are no longer the source of division through reckless judgment. Silence plays a central role in this discipline. Most people fear silence, rushing to fill it with noise. Yet silence is not emptiness. It is space for reflection, for listening, for presence. The Stoics valued listening more than speaking, understanding that wisdom enters through ears more often than through the tongue. When you allow silence, you not only free yourself from unnecessary words, but also create room for deeper connection. In silence, you hear more clearly both others and yourself. Minimalism in speech is as much about the words you do not say as the ones you do. The practice also extends to tone. Words may be few, but still destructive if spoken harshly. Minimalism in speech is not only about reducing quantity, but refining quality. Gentle words can carry truth more effectively than sharp ones. By pruning the harshness, you make space for kindness without sacrificing clarity. This balance calms not only those you speak to, but also your own mind. Anger, expressed in speech, often inflames anger within. Calm speech, even in difficult moments, cultivates inner steadiness. Discipline in speech also affects how you speak to yourself. Inner dialogue can be as noisy as outer conversation, filled with criticism, worry, and endless commentary. By practicing minimalism inwardly, you cut away unnecessary self-talk. You do not indulge in spirals of what if or if only. Instead, you keep your inner words simple, focused on what is in your power. This inner pruning directly shapes outer speech, because the quieter your thoughts, the clearer your words. There is also the matter of promises. People often bind themselves with commitments spoken lightly, agreeing to things they cannot or do not wish to fulfill. Each careless promise becomes a weight on the mind, a source of guilt or stress. Minimalism in speech includes restraint in promises. Say yes only when you mean it, and say no with clarity when you must. This honesty not only simplifies life, but strengthens trust, because others learn that your word carries weight. When you speak, it is believed, because you do not waste speech on empty commitments. Speech also reveals values. A person who constantly complains shows where their attention rests. One who speaks of gratitude reveals a different focus. By curating speech, you train your values into expression. The Stoics emphasized that conversation should uplift, instruct, or at least not harm. By choosing words that reflect virtue, justice, wisdom, courage, temperance, you reinforce these qualities in yourself and offer them to others. This practice makes your words part of your philosophy, an extension of your discipline. Minimalism in speech also brings freedom from regret. Many conflicts, broken friendships, and damaged reputations arise from words spoken in haste. Once spoken, Words cannot be reclaimed. By training yourself to pause, to weigh the necessity and impact of speech, you prevent harm before it begins. This is not repression, but foresight, a recognition that the tongue can ignite fires that take years to extinguish. Choosing fewer words is not cowardice, it is strength, because it places wisdom above impulse. The practice reshapes how you use conversation socially. Many speak to impress, to dominate, or to entertain at the expense of truth. But when you prune speech, you no longer feel compelled to prove yourself through words. You can listen deeply, contribute meaningfully, and leave space for others. This simplicity often draws respect, because restraint is rare in a world of constant chatter. When you do speak, people listen, because your words are not scattered but deliberate. Minimalism in speech also cultivates humility. To talk less is to admit you do not need to have an opinion on everything. The Stoics saw wisdom in recognizing the limits of knowledge. To refrain from speaking where you are ignorant is a form of honesty that protects against arrogance. This humility refines character, teaching you to value learning over boasting. It also makes dialogue richer because you listen to understand rather than to dominate. Even in teaching or leadership where speech is necessary, the Stoic discipline applies. A leader who speaks too much drowns meaning in excess. A teacher who overwhelms with words loses clarity. By pruning speech, leaders and teachers direct attention to the essence. They communicate enough to guide without burdening. This economy of words respects both the listener's time and the truth itself, which rarely requires decoration. To practice minimalism in speech daily, begin with pauses. Before answering, breathe and ask whether the words you plan to speak serve necessity, truth, and virtue. If not, let them go. Another practice is to limit gossip deliberately, noticing how much energy is saved by refusing to join. You can also reflect at the end of the day, which words today created peace and which created chaos. Over time, this reflection shapes speech into a tool for harmony rather than noise. The fruit of this practice is a calmer inner life. When speech is disciplined, the mind follows. Less energy is wasted defending lies, regretting insults, or maintaining appearances. Relationships grow stronger because your words are clear, respectful, and honest. Your presence deepens because silence no longer feels like absence, but like richness. In this way, pruning words prunes inner chaos, leaving behind the simple strength of a life aligned with wisdom. Minimalism in speech, then, is not about muteness, but about mastery. It is the choice to let words serve truth and peace, to cut away excess, to live with clarity in both sound and silence. When words are few but meaningful, life itself feels lighter, freer, more focused. And in that simplicity of expression, you find not only the discipline of Stoicism, but the liberation of a mind unburdened by noise. When words become fewer and lighter, the noise within begins to settle. You no longer waste energy on gossip, exaggeration, or promises that chain you down. Yet even when speech is pruned, the mind often remains heavy with another kind of clutter, the need to control. So much of human restlessness comes not from what we say, but from the endless effort to bend life into our design. People wrestle with outcomes, push against events, and tighten their grip on matters that never belong to them. This grasping is not strength. It is exhaustion disguised as effort. The Stoics offered a radical form of minimalism here, to declutter influence itself, by separating what is within your power from what is not, and releasing the futile struggle against the uncontrollable. The core of this discipline is clarity. At every moment, there are two categories: things you can shape and things you cannot. Your actions, choices, attitudes, these are yours. The weather, the opinions of others, the turning of fate, these are not. Yet most people invert the order. They pour energy into what is outside their reach, begging the world to align with their wishes, while neglecting the one realm they truly command, their own conduct. This misplacement drains life of peace. By reclaiming clarity, you perform the ultimate act of decluttering, freeing your mind from battles that cannot be won. Letting go of control does not mean passivity. It does not mean refusing to act or withdrawing from life. It means precision of effort, focusing only where your influence is real. When you water a plant, you do not command the sun or the rain. You simply do what you can: tend the soil, provide care. Whether the plant thrives depends on forces larger than you. This attitude brings calm strength. You act fully, but without the panic of needing to guarantee outcomes. Effort becomes cleaner because it is not tangled with demands on the universe. One of the most common wastes of influence is in relationships. People try to control how others feel, what they think, or how they respond. They manipulate, argue, or pressure, hoping to shape another's inner world. But no one can control another's mind. The only influence you have is your own behavior, whether you listen with patience, speak with honesty, act with kindness. By focusing on your part alone, you free yourself from frustration. You also honor the freedom of others, allowing them to be as they are, rather than as you insist they must be. This shift transforms conflict into peace because expectation is replaced by acceptance. The same principle applies to reputation. Many burn themselves out protecting an image, trying to control how others see them. Yet perception belongs to others, not to you. At most, you can act with integrity, speak with truth, and hope that your character shines through. Beyond that, reputation is out of your hands. To cling to it is to waste energy on shadows. To release it is to find freedom, because your peace no longer rises and falls with the opinions of strangers. This practice also applies to success and failure. Outcomes are shaped by countless factors: timing, circumstance, chance, and the choices of others. To believe you can control all these elements is illusion. You can control your preparation, your effort, your persistence, but never the full result. By focusing only on what belongs to you, you protect your calm. When results are favorable, you accept them with gratitude. When they are not, you accept them without despair. Either way, you remain steady, because your identity rests not on outcomes, but on the integrity of your actions. Letting go of control also untangles fear. Anxiety often arises from imagining futures you cannot command. You picture disasters, betrayals, losses, and you try to strategize against every possibility. But the future is not yours. The only domain you hold is the present, the choices before you now. By bringing attention back to this moment, you strip fear of its power. You act where you can, and you release the rest. This is not naivety, but wisdom. You acknowledge the limits of your sphere and find peace in working within them. Another form of wasted effort lies in the attempt to control the passage of time. People try to cling to youth, resist aging, or prolong seasons of life that must naturally change. But time flows indifferent to your will. To fight it is to live in grief. To accept it is to find harmony. By letting go of the need to control time, you discover beauty in each stage, strength in youth, wisdom in age, serenity in decline. This acceptance does not shorten life, but enriches it, because you are no longer at war with the inevitable. This principle extends even to the body. You can nourish it, strengthen it, care for it, but you cannot stop its ultimate course. Illness may come despite discipline. Injury may strike despite caution. The Stoics advised gratitude for what health you have and dignity in how you meet its loss. To obsess over complete control is to invite despair. To do your part and release the rest is to walk in freedom. You become a steward, not an owner, of the body entrusted to you. Letting go of control also cultivates humility. When you recognize how much lies outside your command, arrogance softens. You no longer see yourself as master of the universe, but as participant in its flow. This does not weaken you, it strengthens you, because humility aligns you with reality. You act without delusion, and so your efforts are cleaner, wiser, more effective. Humility also dissolves resentment, because you no longer believe the world owes you obedience. You accept what comes as part of the larger order, beyond your reach, yet not beyond your ability to respond. Practical exercises help refine this discipline. Begin by journaling daily. Write down what happened and separate each event into mine and not mine. Notice where you wasted energy trying to command the uncontrollable. Over time, patterns reveal themselves, and you begin to shift effort toward what truly belongs to you. Another practice is the use of phrases. When frustration rises, remind yourself, "This is not mine to control." Repetition strengthens the habit of release until letting go becomes second nature. In relationships, practice this by pausing when you wish to force someone's choice. Instead of insisting, focus on what you can do. Express your truth, set your boundary, offer your help. Release the rest. In work, practice it by anchoring your measure of success in effort rather than results. In health, practice it by focusing on discipline, not on permanence. In all areas, the rule remains: act where you can, release where you cannot. The fruit of this practice is lightness. You stop carrying the weight of the universe on your shoulders. You discover that much of your exhaustion came not from work itself, but from wasted effort on things beyond reach. By decluttering influence, you reclaim energy, focus, and peace. You live more fully in your own sphere, where real freedom lies, and you meet the larger world not with resentment for being uncontrollable, but with respect for its order, however mysterious. In the end, letting go of control is the deepest form of minimalism. It clears not only closets and calendars, but the very heart of human effort. You learn to live where your power truly exists and release where it does not. This separation is radical because it overturns the natural impulse to grasp, but it is also liberating because it frees you from the endless chaos of trying to manage the unmanageable. What remains is simple: a life of focused action, calm acceptance, and uncluttered peace. When you learn to release control and focus only on what belongs to you, life becomes lighter. The storms of fate no longer crush you because you no longer demand that they bend to your will. Yet, there is a deeper test that follows naturally from this practice: how to meet loss. To let go of control is one thing, but to lose what you love, what you built, what you dreamed, that is where philosophy must step beyond theory. Here, the Stoics teach something profound: that loss itself can be carried with grace, even with beauty, when you learn to see it not as theft, but as part of the natural order. This is the art of losing beautifully. Loss touches every human life. Objects break, opportunities slip away, relationships end, and eventually life itself is returned. Most people resist loss fiercely. They grieve not only for what is gone, but for the illusion that it should have stayed forever. This resistance multiplies suffering. To practice losing beautifully is to accept loss as woven into the fabric of existence, not as a failure, but as a completion. It is to approach endings with dignity, seeing them as part of the whole rather than as insults to your worth. Objects provide the simplest practice ground. Possessions age, decay, or vanish. When you cling to them as if they define you, their loss feels like personal diminishment. Yet, when you remember that all objects are temporary companions, you can release them without bitterness. A cracked cup, a faded garment, a lost tool. These are not disasters but reminders that nothing material was ever meant to last. By letting go with calm, you transform what could have been frustration into a lesson in simplicity. Every broken object becomes a teacher of impermanence, showing you how to lose with elegance rather than resentment. The loss of opportunities cuts deeper. Paths not taken, doors that closed before you entered, moments that slipped away. These can weigh heavily if you believe life should have unfolded differently. But opportunity is like the wind. It blows where it will. You cannot hold every chance. To lose beautifully here means trusting that what passes was never truly yours to begin with, and that new paths will open if you keep walking. The past cannot be rewritten, but your response to it can be refined. Instead of drowning in what if, you learn to say, "This too belonged to my fate." Such acceptance frees you from endless replay and allows you to live fully in the possibilities that remain. The loss of people is the deepest of all. Relationships shape our hearts, and when death or separation comes, the absence feels unbearable. Yet even here, the Stoics remind us that nothing is stolen, only returned. Every person who enters your life is a gift on loan, not a permanent possession. To lose beautifully is to honor the time shared without collapsing into despair when it ends. This does not mean avoiding grief. Grief is natural and human. But beauty in loss appears when grief is joined with gratitude, when sorrow is balanced by the recognition that to have loved at all was a gift beyond measure. The heart learns to hold absence with tenderness, not bitterness, knowing that love remains even when presence is gone. Losing beautifully also means refusing to let loss harden you. Many respond to pain by closing, by building walls, by refusing to risk again. But true grace lies in staying open, even after loss. The Stoics saw that vulnerability to change is part of life's design. By remaining open, you do not deny the possibility of future pain, but you also allow the possibility of future joy. Losing beautifully, then, is not only about how you meet endings, but also about how you prepare for beginnings. Each loss becomes a teacher of resilience, showing you that you can endure and even flourish without clinging. There is an aesthetic dimension to this practice. To lose beautifully is to approach loss not only with resilience, but with artistry. Just as a dancer turns even falling into part of the performance, so can you treat loss as an expression of dignity. Instead of raging, you bow to what is gone. Instead of despair, you cultivate calm. This composure is not coldness, it is elegance. It shows that you have understood the nature of life, that endings are not mistakes, but necessary movements in the larger design. Practical exercises can strengthen this skill. One is deliberate rehearsal. Reflect regularly on what you might lose. your possessions, your health, your relationships. This is not pessimism, but preparation. By imagining loss ahead of time, you soften its sting when it comes. Another practice is gratitude in the present. When you look at what you have, remind yourself that it will not last and love it more deeply now. This way, when it passes, your memory is not of neglect, but of presence. Finally, practice release in small ways. Give away what you no longer need. End habits that no longer serve you. Step lightly from attachments that weigh you down. Each act trains the soul to lose with peace. The art of losing beautifully also alters your view of identity. Many cling to roles, achievements, or stories of who they are. When life strips these away, they feel destroyed. But if you learn to let go of identities as they fade, you see that the self is not a fixed possession, but a flowing process. You lose roles, but you remain. You lose achievements, but you remain. To lose beautifully here means to accept change in selfhood, to see each ending as the clearing that allows a new chapter to grow. In the realm of ambition, losing beautifully protects against despair. Every pursuit carries risk of failure, and failure is simply loss in another form. Many collapse under it, seeing it as final judgment. But to lose beautifully in failure is to meet it with composure, to treat it as a teacher rather than a curse. You examine what can be learned, release what cannot be changed, and carry forward with dignity. This transforms failure from shame into refinement, from destruction into growth. Even in the face of mortality, the art of losing beautifully reaches its highest form. Life itself is a possession we cannot keep. To resist this truth is to live in fear. To embrace it is to live fully until the last breath. The Stoics practiced this perspective constantly, reminding themselves that death is not theft, but completion. To die beautifully is to return life with grace, grateful for the time it was loaned, unafraid of its return. This is the ultimate expression of minimalism, releasing not only objects, roles, and relationships, but life itself, with serenity. The deeper gift of this practice is liberation. When you know how to lose beautifully, fear loses its grip. You no longer cling desperately to what must pass, nor waste energy fighting endings. Instead, you move through life lightly, ready to love fully, but also ready to release. This makes your joys deeper, because you are no longer haunted by their impermanence. It makes your grief cleaner, because you do not resist what must be. And it makes your character steadier, because you stand rooted not in possessions or outcomes, but in wisdom. Losing beautifully is not about pretending that pain does not exist. It is about meeting pain with courage and dignity. It is about finding elegance in endings, peace in impermanence, and gratitude in what has been given. By practicing this, you transform loss from an enemy into a companion, a guide that shapes your soul into one capable of grace under all conditions. And in this way, every loss, far from diminishing you, becomes part of the artistry of living well. When you learn the art of losing beautifully, life softens in its harshness. You begin to see that endings, though painful, can carry their own kind of elegance. You accept objects breaking, people leaving, and even life itself returning to the whole with a quiet strength that does not resist reality. Yet this wisdom leads to an even greater challenge, the unknown future. It is one thing to release what has already gone, but it is another to meet what has not yet arrived. Here, the Stoics take amor fati to its most radical form, not only loving what has happened, but also loving what has yet to come. even though it is hidden in uncertainty. The unknown has always stirred unease. Minds crave certainty, grasping at predictions and control. People want to know whether they will succeed or fail, whether they will be loved or abandoned, whether they will live long or die soon. This hunger for foresight creates endless anxiety because the future refuses to reveal itself. To practice amor fati in uncertainty is to stop demanding clarity before living. It is to step into the fog with trust, embracing what is not yet known as part of your path, no less worthy of love than the past you have already walked. Accepting the past is powerful, but it often comes after the fact, when events are already fixed and reflection has softened their edge. Loving the future in advance requires greater courage. It demands that you open your arms to both possibilities, the joy and the pain, before they unfold. This is not passive surrender. It is active affirmation, a willingness to declare that whatever comes will belong to you, that no twist of fate can steal the meaning from your life. This mindset transforms uncertainty from a threat into a companion. Uncertainty can feel heavy because it exposes your lack of control. Careers may collapse, health may falter, relationships may shift. The temptation is to plan obsessively, to seek assurance in endless strategies. But planning has limits, and when it becomes obsession, it turns into a prison of fear. Amor fati breaks that prison by reminding you that uncertainty is not an enemy, but the very texture of life. If everything were known, life would lose its vitality. The future's unpredictability is what allows growth, surprise, and transformation. By loving this unpredictability, you open yourself to life in its raw, unfiltered truth. The practice begins with reframing anxiety. When worry arises, it is a sign that your mind is rehearsing possible futures it cannot control. Instead of resisting this, acknowledge it and then redirect. Say to yourself, "Yes, whatever happens, I will love it as part of my fate." This simple affirmation dissolves the knot of fear. You still act wisely in the present. You prepare, you plan, you choose. But you do not tie your peace to the illusion of certainty. Each time you affirm love for what is yet to come, you train the soul to walk into uncertainty with steadiness. Trust in uncertainty also deepens resilience. When you love fate in advance, shocks and surprises lose their power to crush you. Good fortune delights you, but you do not cling. Misfortune challenges you, but you do not collapse. Both are embraced as necessary pieces of the larger design. This balance makes you unshakable because you have already declared allegiance to life in all its forms. By removing the condition that the future must match your desires, you free yourself from the endless cycle of disappointment. Relationships offer one of the richest areas to practice this. No connection comes with guarantees. To love someone is to step into uncertainty, whether they will stay, whether they will change, whether they will leave. Many suffocate relationships by trying to control this uncertainty, demanding promises of permanence. But amor fati invites you to release those demands and instead love what unfolds, whether it lasts a lifetime or only a season. This makes love freer, more generous, because it is not bound by fear of loss. You cherish the moments given, while trusting that even endings can be embraced. Work and ambition are also colored by uncertainty. No career path, no project, no dream comes with assurance. Efforts may bear fruit or wither. Many are paralyzed by this, afraid to begin unless success is guaranteed. But by loving fate in uncertainty, you free yourself to act boldly. You pursue with vigor, not because you know the outcome, but because the act itself is worthy. Whatever result follows, you embrace it as part of your journey. This liberates ambition from fear and turns it into pure engagement with life. Health, too, is steeped in uncertainty. You may exercise, eat wisely, and care for your body, yet illness may come without warning. Many live in dread of this, waiting for signs of decline. But Amor Fati teaches you to accept health and sickness alike as part of the rhythm of existence. This does not mean neglecting care, but it does mean releasing fear. You live well today, and you meet tomorrow as it arrives, whether it brings strength or weakness. This love of fate transforms even illness into opportunity, for patience, for courage, for deeper appreciation of what remains. The practice of loving uncertainty is not naive optimism. It does not deny that the future may bring suffering. It acknowledges it fully and still chooses affirmation. This is why it is more powerful than mere acceptance of the past. Acceptance often comes when pain has already been endured and softened by time. Amor Fati, in uncertainty, requires you to love even the possibility of pain before it strikes. It asks you to embrace storms before they arrive, to bless doors before you know where they lead. This is strength of the highest order because it roots peace not in conditions, but in conviction. Exercises can cultivate this mindset. One is the nightly reminder that tomorrow is unknown. Before sleep, reflect that the next day may bring joy or hardship, and commit to love both equally. Another is to face small uncertainties deliberately. Step into situations where outcomes are unclear and practice embracing them rather than resisting. Over time, the mind becomes less anxious, more curious, more willing to meet the unknown with calm. Each rehearsal prepares you for the larger uncertainties that fate inevitably brings. Nature also teaches this lesson. Seeds are planted without certainty of growth. Storms come without certainty of their path. Animals migrate without certainty of survival. Yet life continues, thriving in the midst of unpredictability. To align with this rhythm is to see uncertainty not as flaw, but as foundation. Just as the river flows because it does not know every bend ahead, so life flows because the future is hidden. By loving this flow, you participate fully in nature's design. The deepest expression of Amor Fati in uncertainty is found in mortality itself. Death's timing is unknown, its manner unpredictable. Many live in dread of this uncertainty, trying to push it away. But to love fate here is to accept that the end, whenever and however it arrives, belongs as much to your life as your beginning did. To live this way is to walk without fear, because you have already embraced the final uncertainty. Every day becomes a gift, not because it is guaranteed, but because it is not. In the end, loving fate in uncertainty is the most radical form of freedom. It strips away the need for guarantees, the endless bargaining with life, the fragile peace tied to outcomes. You declare instead, whatever comes, I will meet it with love. This declaration transforms fear into courage, anxiety into trust, fragility into strength. It allows you to step into the unknown not as a prisoner, but as a partner, walking with fate rather than against it. And in that walk, you discover the rarest peace, not the peace of certainty, but the peace of belonging to life exactly as it unfolds. When you learn to love fate in uncertainty, you loosen the chains of fear that bind so many lives. You stop waiting for guarantees before living and begin to welcome the unknown as part of your path. Yet freedom from fear is only one part of the Stoic journey. Another subtle weight remains, one that often disguises itself as motivation or ambition: the endless pull of desire. Even when possessions are simplified, the mind can still be cluttered with cravings for status, admiration, recognition, or the next great achievement. To live simply requires not only clearing physical excess, but also decluttering the inner landscape of wants. This is the art of reducing desire itself, leaving only what aligns with reason and virtue. Desire is powerful because it hides behind noble words. Ambition is praised as drive, recognition is mistaken for success, and prestige is often confused with dignity. Yet these desires enslave when they grow unchecked. The more you chase them, the more they multiply, leaving you restless no matter how much you achieve. The Stoics saw that true freedom is not in satisfying every craving, but in disciplining desire, trimming it down to what serves life rather than consumes it. By wanting less, you actually gain more peace, more clarity, and more strength. The first step is to distinguish between natural needs and constructed wants. Food, shelter, companionship, these are natural. Prestige, constant admiration, endless wealth, these are constructed by society's illusions. The mind easily confuses them, treating applause as necessary as bread. But applause is never in your control. It rests on the shifting winds of others' opinions. When you declutter desires, you learn to release those that tie your worth to forces beyond you. You begin to seek satisfaction in what depends on your own character, rather than in what belongs to others. Ambition often feels productive, but it can be a subtle form of bondage. To desire endless achievement is to anchor your peace in outcomes that fade. A promotion, a title, an award, they feel sweet for a moment, then dissolve, leaving you hungry again. This cycle never ends, because desire for achievement is insatiable. The Stoic alternative is not laziness, but purpose. You pursue work not for glory, but because it aligns with virtue. Success is welcomed if it comes, but it is not the source of identity. By decluttering ambition, you make space for excellence in effort rather than endless hunger for recognition. Prestige is another heavy burden. To seek honor is to hand control of your happiness to the crowd. One day they praise, the next they condemn. Many waste their lives tailoring themselves to win admiration, only to discover that admiration is fickle and fleeting. The Stoics taught that prestige is indifferent. It adds nothing to the soul's worth. True dignity comes from living justly, wisely, and with courage, regardless of applause. When you shed the craving for prestige, you stop performing for an audience and start living for truth. This is a deeper form of minimalism, stripping away the illusion that value comes from others' approval. Recognition is closely tied to ego. The desire to be seen, acknowledged, or remembered fuels endless restlessness. Yet history is filled with forgotten names, once celebrated and now vanished. The Stoics reminded that even emperors fade into dust. To seek immortality through recognition is to fight a losing battle. The wiser path is to live well in the present without demanding eternal memory. Deeds done in virtue carry their own reward, whether remembered or forgotten. Decluttering the desire for recognition allows you to focus on what matters, being true to yourself, not being recorded by others. This practice does not kill ambition, but purifies it. Stripped of craving for applause or wealth, ambition becomes directed toward inner growth, mastery, and service. You still work, create, and strive, but you no longer measure your worth by comparison or external reward. Each action becomes meaningful in itself, independent of outcome. This is freedom, because your peace is no longer hostage to conditions beyond your control. Decluttering desire turns ambition from a chain into a tool. The discipline extends to smaller desires as well: the craving for comfort, the itch for novelty, the hunger for constant entertainment. All of these scatter the mind and erode peace. By practicing restraint, you discover that comfort is sweet only when you are not enslaved to it. Novelty is delightful only when not demanded, and entertainment is enjoyable only when balanced by silence. You learn to take pleasure without clinging, to release without bitterness. This moderation creates spaciousness within, where clarity and calm can grow. Exercises can help refine this process. One is voluntary discomfort. Practice living with less comfort than you are used to, such as fasting, walking in cold, or living simply for a time. These exercises reveal how little you truly need and train the mind to stop fearing lack. Another is reflection. Ask yourself regularly whether the desires you chase are natural or constructed, within your control or beyond it. By questioning desire, you weaken its grip. A third exercise is gratitude. By focusing on what you already have, the craving for more loses power. Gratitude declutters the restless mind by reminding you of abundance in simplicity. The deeper reward of this practice is peace. When desires are many, the mind is noisy, pulled in countless directions. When desires are few, the mind becomes still, focused, content. You no longer feel torn between endless cravings. You can live with clarity. This peace is not dullness, but richness, because it allows you to savor what is present without always reaching for what is absent. It makes each moment fuller because it is not clouded by dissatisfaction. Decluttering desires also transforms relationships. When you no longer demand recognition, admiration, or constant validation, you free others from the weight of meeting your cravings. Relationships become lighter, freer, and more genuine. Love turns from possession into appreciation. Friendship becomes about presence, not performance. Family becomes about shared life, not status. By wanting less from others, you actually gain deeper connection with them, because you can love them for who they are rather than for how they feed your ego. Even in solitude, this discipline brings strength. Many fear being alone because their desires are external. They need constant attention, entertainment, or distraction. But when desires are pruned, solitude becomes peace. You are no longer restless without noise or company because you are content within yourself. This self-sufficiency is the foundation of resilience. A person who desires little is unshakable because their peace does not depend on conditions outside their soul. Decluttering desires ultimately clarifies purpose. Life becomes less about chasing illusions and more about living with integrity. You stop scattering energy across countless wants and concentrate it on what aligns with reason and virtue. This concentration brings power. Like a river freed from diversions, your energy flows with greater force. You act not out of craving, but out of clarity, and your life reflects depth rather than distraction. In the end, minimalism of desire is the highest form of wealth. To own fewer things simplifies the house, but to want fewer things simplifies the soul. To be satisfied with enough, to act without craving prestige, to live without demanding recognition. This is true abundance. It is not that you give up life, but that you stop cluttering it with illusions. What remains is pure peace, presence, and freedom. And in that freedom, you discover that to want little is to have everything. When desires are decluttered and the restless hunger for status, recognition, or endless ambition falls silent, a new kind of clarity begins to appear. Yet even with inner simplicity, the world outside still shouts. Every culture is saturated with noise, advertisements urging you to buy what you don't need, political storms demanding your outrage, and digital distractions designed to keep you scrolling, watching, and consuming. Even if you free yourself inwardly, this outer storm presses in, trying to pull you back into craving, reaction, and distraction. It is here that Stoic minimalism becomes not just a personal practice, but an act of rebellion. The deliberate refusal to be ruled by cultural noise. Cultural noise is not simply background chatter. It is the constant pressure to conform, to define yourself by possessions, affiliations, or opinions that are fed to you. It tells you what to desire, what to fear, what to admire, and even what to hate. Left unexamined, it can drown out your own reason, replacing authentic choice with borrowed impulses. The Stoics recognized this danger in their own time. Rome, like our modern world, was filled with spectacles, propaganda, and luxury that could sweep people away from virtue. Their response was resistance, not loud protest, but quiet refusal, choosing simplicity over excess, clarity over noise, and virtue over conformity. Consumer culture is one of the loudest forms of this noise. It thrives on dissatisfaction, whispering that you are never enough unless you buy more, upgrade more, accumulate more. The cycle is endless. Once you acquire what is advertised, desire shifts to the next thing. This constant consumption feeds neither peace nor joy, but anxiety and emptiness. To resist this, Stoic minimalism cuts through the illusion. You learn to see possessions as tools, not trophies, and to measure wealth not by accumulation, but by sufficiency. By stepping outside the cycle of endless consumption, you reclaim freedom. Every refusal to buy what is unnecessary is a small act of rebellion against a culture that profits from your restlessness. Political noise is another form of cultural clutter. Societies often demand constant outrage, constant division, constant allegiance to factions. People are urged to define themselves by slogans and group identities, losing sight of their individual reason and shared humanity. The Stoics warned against being swept into the passions of the crowd, where anger and fear dominate. They urged focus on justice and virtue rather than blind partisanship. To resist political noise is not to withdraw from responsibility, but to act with clarity instead of reacting to manipulation. It means stepping back from the frenzy of endless debate and anchoring yourself in principles that do not shift with the tides of popular opinion. Digital noise, perhaps the most pervasive today, floods attention every waking hour. Notifications, headlines, arguments, endless feeds of images and opinions. These scatter the mind into fragments. Instead of depth, the culture rewards speed. Instead of reflection, it encourages constant reaction. This noise is not neutral. It is engineered to capture and monetize your attention. The Stoic response would be to reclaim sovereignty over your focus. By setting boundaries, by choosing silence over constant stimulation, by deliberately limiting what you consume, you create space for thought and presence. Each act of digital restraint is an assertion that your mind is not for sale. The strength of Stoic minimalism lies in its refusal to be defined by what is loudest. Cultural noise tells you to measure yourself by external markers, possessions, popularity, ideology. Minimalism says, measure yourself instead by the quality of your thoughts, the integrity of your actions, the steadiness of your soul. This shift is revolutionary because it withdraws power from the systems that rely on your compliance. A person who needs little, who reacts slowly, who thinks independently, is not easily controlled. That is why minimalism, in its Stoic form, is more than a lifestyle. It is philosophical resistance. This resistance does not require isolation from the world. You still live among noise, but you choose not to let it govern you. You may use technology, but you are not its servant. You may participate in society, but you are not consumed by faction. You may own possessions, but they do not own you. Each act of restraint is a way of asserting freedom, a quiet but powerful rebellion that protects the inner space where reason and virtue can flourish. Practical steps embody this rebellion. Refuse to be pulled into every news cycle. Instead, focus on what you can influence directly. Limit possessions to what serves your purpose and let go of the rest. Treat technology as a tool, not as a master. Practice silence daily, creating distance from the constant roar of culture. And above all, examine desires carefully, asking whether they are truly yours or whether they have been planted by voices that profit from your dissatisfaction. The reward for this resistance is clarity. When the noise fades, even for a moment, you rediscover your own voice. You can think without being pushed, act without being manipulated, and live without being consumed. The world may continue its shouting, but you walk through it calmly, not because you are indifferent, but because you have chosen not to be ruled by it. This is the essence of Stoic rebellion, not loud defiance, but quiet mastery. In the end, minimalism as resistance is about reclaiming sovereignty over your life. It is about refusing to let consumerism dictate your worth, politics dictate your anger, or technology dictate your attention. It is about living deliberately, rooted in reason, guided by virtue. To live this way is to resist not only cultural noise, but also the inner noise it creates. And in that resistance, you discover freedom. Not the freedom to have everything, but the freedom to need little, to think clearly, and to walk through the world as your own master. When cultural noise is resisted and the endless demands of consumerism, politics, and digital distraction are silenced, what remains is a rare kind of clarity. Yet silence from the outside is not enough if the mind itself continues to resist life at every turn. Even without external clutter, many people live with inner friction. The constant grinding of "this should not be happening" or "life would be better if only things were different." This is where amor fati reaches its most transformative power. By learning to treat every obstacle as part of the path, you begin to move with life instead of against it. The result is a frictionless mind, one that flows with events instead of exhausting itself in resistance. Inner resistance wastes more energy than any external problem. A difficult person, a setback at work, an unexpected change, these are not unbearable in themselves. What makes them heavy is the mental battle against them, the refusal to let them be what they are. The Stoics taught that events are neutral. It is your judgment that gives them weight. A frictionless mind is not passive. It still acts, still works, still strives, but it does so without the grinding gears of resentment. It sees each obstacle as raw material to be shaped, not as an enemy to be hated. This approach transforms difficulty into fuel. When something blocks your way, you no longer treat it as wasted effort, but as part of your training. A hard conversation becomes practice in patience. A loss becomes practice in resilience. A failure becomes practice in humility. Nothing is wasted because everything belongs. Marcus Aurelius described it simply: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is amor fati at its core, the conversion of resistance into momentum. The frictionless mind also eliminates the fatigue of constant complaint. Complaining is friction made audible, the endless protest that life has not arranged itself according to your wishes. But protest does not change events. It only multiplies misery. By embracing amor fati, you stop demanding that life be easier and start treating life as the training ground it is. Each challenge becomes less of an interruption and more of a lesson. The mind rests lighter when it no longer argues with reality. Another source of friction is expectation. When you insist that life follow your script, every deviation feels like an injury. But life does not follow scripts. It unfolds in ways too vast to predict. To release expectation is to free yourself from constant shock. A frictionless mind still hopes, still plans, but it does not cling. When events arrive differently, it does not waste energy fighting them. It adapts, learns, and continues, carrying no resentment. Flexibility replaces rigidity, and peace replaces disappointment. Even small irritations show the value of this mindset. Traffic, delays, mistakes, these drain enormous energy when resisted. But when accepted as part of fate, they lose their sting. The event remains, but the suffering attached to it vanishes. This does not mean enjoying frustration, but it does mean refusing to feed it with extra anger. By treating even the smallest obstacles as teachers, the mind begins to glide rather than grind. The frictionless mind is not detached from action. It is sharpened for it. By conserving energy wasted on resistance, you have more to devote to what can actually be done. You respond faster, think more clearly, act more effectively. Obstacles still require effort, but the effort is clean, free from bitterness. Like water flowing around rocks, you move forward without being broken. This clarity of effort is what allows you to find flow, even in difficulty. Relationships also benefit from this practice. Much of human conflict comes from resisting how others are. People spend years wishing someone would change, resenting them for not fitting an ideal. But you cannot control others. You can only control yourself. By accepting others as they are, you remove the friction of unrealistic demands. This does not mean tolerating harm without boundary, but it does mean meeting people as they are rather than wasting energy wishing they were different. Relationships grow calmer when friction is removed, and connection deepens when acceptance replaces resistance. The same applies to yourself. Many people live in constant battle with their own nature, regretting past mistakes, resenting current flaws, fearing future weakness. This inner friction drains peace. But if you embrace amor fati, you begin to see even your imperfections as part of the path. Mistakes become teachers, flaws become challenges for growth, and fears become opportunities for courage. By treating yourself with the same acceptance you extend to fate, you move with your own life rather than against it. The practice of creating a frictionless mind requires daily attention. One method is to pause when resistance arises and ask, "Can I use this instead of fighting it?" This reframes the obstacle as material for growth. Another method is reflection. At the end of each day, recall the moments that stirred anger or frustration and deliberately reinterpret them as training. Over time, the mind learns this habit automatically, meeting challenges with curiosity instead of complaint. This discipline also prepares you for greater trials. Small frictions train the mind for larger ones. By practicing acceptance in traffic, you prepare for acceptance in illness. By practicing patience with minor delays, you prepare for patience in serious loss. The frictionless mind is built gradually, one moment at a time, until even the heaviest challenges find you steady and unbroken. At its deepest level, the frictionless mind is about harmony with the universe. Resistance comes from the illusion that life is supposed to serve your will. Flow comes from realizing that you are part of a larger order, moving with it rather than against it. When you stop demanding that life remove every obstacle, you discover that obstacles are part of life's very design. They shape you, refine you, and guide you. To love them is to align yourself with reality. The reward for this practice is freedom from wasted energy. Instead of burning out in resistance, you move forward with calm strength. You stop grinding against what cannot be changed and start using everything that happens as fuel. Life remains unpredictable, but you are no longer thrown off course. You move like water, flowing through difficulty, carrying peace within, even as storms rage outside. This is the essence of amor fati, not just acceptance, but transformation. Obstacles do not vanish, but they no longer bind you. They become the very material of your growth, the current that carries you forward. And when the mind flows like this, without friction, without waste, without resistance, you discover the rarest form of freedom, the ability to live fully in harmony with fate, unbroken and unhindered, no matter what arises. When the mind learns to move without friction, life feels lighter. Obstacles no longer sap strength, but become part of the flow, and resistance no longer consumes energy. Yet even in this freedom, another subtle fear often lingers in the background, the fear of losing comfort, wealth, or security. Many people, even when outwardly calm, live with a hidden anxiety that disaster might strip them of what they rely on. This fear weakens the soul because it ties peace to possessions and circumstances. The Stoics knew this well, and they devised a practice to break the hold of such fear: voluntary poverty. By deliberately living with less, even when more is available, you inoculate yourself against deprivation and awaken a deeper gratitude for what you already have. Voluntary poverty is not a celebration of misery. It is a drill, a rehearsal, a philosophical exercise. Seneca described it clearly. Set aside a few days to eat coarse food, to wear rough clothing, to sleep simply, and then ask yourself, is this what I feared? The point is not self-punishment, but freedom. By experiencing simplicity firsthand, you discover that survival does not require endless luxury. You realize that comfort, though pleasant, is not essential. This realization weakens the power of fear, because you have proven to yourself that you can endure less and still remain whole. The fear of poverty is one of humanity's oldest burdens. People devote their lives to accumulating wealth, not always from greed, but often from terror of losing it. This fear chains them to endless work, compromises their integrity, and fills their hearts with anxiety. Voluntary poverty strikes directly at this chain. By stepping into simplicity willingly, you train the mind to see that poverty is not a monster, but simply a different condition of living. Once you know you can endure it, the fear that once ruled you dissolves. You may still prefer comfort, but you no longer depend on it for peace. This practice also awakens appreciation. When you return from days of simplicity to your normal life, ordinary things feel extraordinary. Plain food tastes rich, clean clothing feels luxurious, a safe home feels like abundance. Comfort ceases to be invisible and becomes a gift. By stepping away from it deliberately, you learn to see it with new eyes. Gratitude grows not from constant gain, but from remembering how little is truly required. Voluntary poverty resets the mind, stripping away numbness and replacing it with awe at the simplest blessings. There is also a moral dimension to this practice. Wealth often separates people, creating illusions of superiority. But when you live simply, even temporarily, you reconnect with the universality of human experience. Hunger, cold, and roughness are conditions shared by countless people throughout history and even in the present. Voluntary poverty humbles the ego and reminds you that dignity is not measured by possessions, but by character. This humility strengthens compassion, because you no longer see yourself as distant from those who have less. Voluntary poverty also disciplines desire. Luxury breeds new cravings, each one louder than the last. When you feed the appetite endlessly, it grows insatiable. By withdrawing from it, you silence the noise. You rediscover sufficiency, the feeling that this is enough. This discipline not only simplifies life, but strengthens resilience. If fate removes wealth or comfort against your will, you will not collapse, because you have already practiced living without them. You have turned poverty into familiar ground, and familiarity dissolves fear. Practical application is simple but powerful. Choose a period of time, perhaps a few days each month, where you eat the simplest food, wear plain clothing, and live with minimal comfort. During this time, reflect deliberately. Is this unbearable, or is it survivable? Most often, the realization comes that life remains intact, dignity remains intact, and peace is still possible. This practice is like a vaccine. Small doses of discomfort prepare you for larger trials. This exercise can also extend beyond possessions to conveniences. Walk instead of driving, sleep without excess comfort, disconnect from technology. Each practice sharpens awareness of how much you rely on ease and how little you truly need it. Each time you discover that peace survives without comfort, your freedom expands. You are no longer hostage to convenience. You can use it when available, but release it when absent. The wisdom of voluntary poverty lies in its paradox. By choosing less, you gain more. You gain freedom from fear, gratitude for abundance, compassion for others, and resilience against hardship. You discover that possessions and comfort are not the foundation of peace, but only additions to it. The true foundation lies in virtue, in clarity, in the strength of the soul. By practicing with less, you prove to yourself that this foundation holds firm no matter what fate brings. The deepest reward is confidence. Many people live in quiet dread of losing everything, but those who have rehearsed poverty carry a calm certainty. They know that even if stripped of wealth, they will endure. They have already tested themselves in the crucible of simplicity. They no longer beg fate for guarantees because they have made themselves stronger than circumstance. This confidence is unshakable because it does not rest on external security but on inner resilience. Voluntary poverty is not about glorifying suffering, but about removing illusion. It exposes the false belief that peace depends on luxury, that dignity depends on wealth, that happiness depends on endless comfort. It teaches that less is survivable and sometimes even liberating. It inoculates against fear and awakens gratitude, not by theory, but by experience. And in this way, it becomes one of the most powerful Stoic drills, an exercise that prepares you for life's uncertainty with calm, with courage, and with freedom. When you practice voluntary poverty and discover that life remains whole even with less, fear begins to loosen its grip. You realize that comfort and luxury are optional, not essential, and that strength comes from within rather than from possessions. But there is another form of excess that weighs heavily on modern life, one that no closet can contain: the overcrowded calendar. Many people are not crushed by hunger or poverty, but by busyness, rushing from one commitment to another until their days blur into exhaustion. If Stoic minimalism trains you to need less in material terms, then its rarest and perhaps most radical form is to need less in terms of time commitments. A minimalist calendar is not empty idleness. It is the deliberate act of reclaiming silence and margin, of choosing fewer obligations so that life can be lived with presence and depth. Time is the one resource that cannot be replaced. Every possession can be regained, every opportunity reattempted, but an hour spent is gone forever. Yet most people treat time as though it were infinite, filling it with endless obligations, meetings, and distractions. The result is not a richer life, but a thinner one, stretched too tightly to allow reflection or rest. The Stoics knew that wasting time is the greatest poverty. Seneca wrote that people are careful with their money, yet careless with their time, even though time is infinitely more valuable. A minimalist calendar seeks to reverse this error by treating hours as treasures, guarded against needless consumption. The problem is not only external demands, but also internal fear. Many overfill their calendars out of anxiety, fear of missing out, fear of being unproductive, fear of disappointing others. But this fear enslaves. The Stoic practice offers a different measure. Value not the number of things you do, but the quality of your attention in doing them. An uncluttered schedule is not laziness, but wisdom, because it allows for deliberate action instead of scattered reaction. A full calendar may look impressive, but a calm calendar leads to a richer soul. Silence is one of the greatest gifts of a minimalist calendar. In silence, the mind has space to breathe, to notice, to reflect. Without silence, thought becomes shallow, lost in noise. The Stoics treasured silence because it allowed them to examine their impressions, to distinguish truth from illusion, and to anchor themselves in reason. Today, silence is rare, drowned by endless activity. To reclaim it requires courage, the courage to say no, to leave gaps, to resist the pressure of busyness. Each block of silence on the calendar is not empty but full of reflection, of presence, of clarity. Margin is equally essential. Margin is the space between commitments, the breathing room that prevents life from becoming a relentless march. Without margin, even small disruptions cause chaos. A delayed train, an unexpected call, a moment of fatigue, all become crises in an overfilled schedule. But with margin, life absorbs these disruptions without collapse. Margin allows for flexibility, for spontaneity, for humanity. The Stoics valued preparedness, but they also valued adaptability. A minimalist calendar, with its built-in space, reflects this wisdom. It gives you strength, not by filling every moment, but by leaving room for the unexpected. Another benefit of a minimalist calendar is depth. When your time is scattered across too many tasks, none of them receive full attention. But when you choose fewer commitments, you can give yourself fully to each one. This is the essence of Stoic focus, to do what is before you with excellence, without distraction. Depth of presence transforms ordinary actions into meaningful ones. A conversation becomes richer, a task more satisfying, a walk more restorative. Life feels fuller, not because you did more, but because you did what mattered with presence. This discipline also reshapes relationships. Many people fill their calendars with obligations to appear busy or important, leaving little room for genuine connection. But relationships thrive not in hurried appointments, but in unhurried presence. A minimalist calendar creates the space to sit with a friend without watching the clock, to listen without rushing, to share life without distraction. The Stoics valued friendship deeply, but they knew it required time. By choosing fewer obligations, you make room for relationships to flourish. The minimalist calendar also protects against burnout. Overcommitment exhausts the body, scatters the mind, and dulls the spirit. People collapse not only from great tragedies, but from the relentless weight of small obligations stacked without rest. The Stoics taught moderation in all things, and this includes time. To moderate the calendar is to preserve energy for what matters most. It is to recognize that saying yes to everything is a form of self-betrayal because it leaves no room for reflection, for virtue, or for joy. Practical exercises can help reclaim the calendar. One is the discipline of refusal. Before adding a new commitment, pause and ask whether it aligns with your values or whether it simply feeds busyness. Another is the practice of subtraction. Regularly review your schedule and remove what no longer serves purpose. A third is the deliberate creation of empty blocks, time reserved for nothing but silence or reflection. These exercises retrain the mind to see time as wealth and to guard it against unnecessary expenditure. The reward for a minimalist calendar is not only rest, but power. When your time is uncluttered, you act with greater clarity and decisiveness. You are no longer pulled in 100 directions, but move with focus. This makes each action more effective, each decision more thoughtful. The Stoics saw this as the essence of mastery, to live deliberately, not reactively, to shape life rather than be shaped by it. A calendar filled with noise enslaves, a calendar pruned with care liberates. Ultimately, the minimalist calendar is about reclaiming life itself. Every commitment is a trade, and when you say yes to one thing, you say no to countless others. To live without awareness of this trade is to spend life carelessly. To live with awareness is to choose wisely, to spend hours only where they truly matter. This is not selfishness, but stewardship, the recognition that your time is not infinite and that to waste it is to dishonor life itself. In the end, the rarest form of minimalism is not in possessions or even desires, but in time. To live with fewer commitments is to reclaim silence, margin, depth, and freedom. It is to resist the cultural glorification of busyness and to choose instead the richness of presence. The Stoics remind us that life is measured not by length, but by quality, not by how much you did, but by how fully you lived. And when your calendar reflects this wisdom, you step into each day, not rushed, not scattered, but grounded, clear, and truly alive. When the calendar is uncluttered and silence and margin are reclaimed, life feels lighter, clearer, and more deliberate. Yet even with a minimalist approach to time, another form of hidden weight often lingers: one that cannot be seen in schedules or rooms, but only within the mind. This weight is the quiet hoarding of memory. People carry old stories, replay past events, and cling to identities built on what has already happened. Just as possessions can fill a home until there is no room to breathe, memories can crowd the soul until the present is suffocated. The Stoics understood that dwelling endlessly on the past is a subtle form of slavery. Amor fati, the love of fate, offers the path to freedom by teaching us to release not only material clutter, but also the burden of memory. Memory is both a gift and a trap. It preserves wisdom, offers lessons, and stores joy. But when memory is clung to without balance, it becomes a cage. Many live in constant rehearsal of past injuries, reliving pain long after the event has ended. Others replay successes, trying to hold on to former glory that no longer exists. Both are forms of hoarding, an attempt to preserve what nature has already moved beyond. This attachment to memory consumes energy that could otherwise be spent on the present. The past becomes like a heavy chest carried on the back, filled not with useful tools, but with stones. The Stoics taught that the past is not in our control. It is finished, sealed, and unchangeable. To give it endless attention is to waste the only part of time that belongs to us, the now. Seneca wrote that life is divided into three parts: the past, the present, and the future, and that most people surrender the present by living either in regret of the past or fear of the future. The hidden excess of memory is precisely this surrender, the constant draining of today's vitality into yesterday's shadows. Minimalism of the mind begins with releasing what cannot be altered. This does not mean erasing memory. Lessons from the past are valuable when used wisely, but the difference is between learning and clinging. Learning means extracting wisdom and moving forward. Clinging means replaying events as if replay alone could change them. The Stoics practiced reflective journaling to process the day, but once reflection was complete, they released it. They did not hoard stories as personal treasures or wounds, but treated them as teachers whose purpose was fulfilled. The minimalist mind remembers enough to live wisely, but not so much that life becomes trapped in recollection. One of the most subtle forms of memory hoarding is identity. People define themselves by what has happened to them, by childhood, by careers, by achievements, by failures. These stories can feel comforting because they give shape to the self. But they also limit growth because the mind becomes chained to what once was. To say, "I am this because of my past," is to freeze yourself in time, denying the possibility of becoming more. Amor fati invites you to release these identities, to see yourself not as a museum of past stories, but as a living soul in constant motion. Another way memory becomes excess is through nostalgia. The longing for a golden past, whether personal or cultural, can blind you to the beauty of the present. Nostalgia idealizes what once was and compares it to now, often unfairly. But the past, when it was lived, was just as imperfect as today. To dwell in nostalgia is to mourn illusions, missing the real richness of what stands before you. By practicing acceptance of the present, you loosen the grip of nostalgia and discover gratitude for the life unfolding now. Regret is perhaps the heaviest form of memory clutter. It ties the mind to mistakes, replaying them endlessly. Yet regret is only useful when it teaches. Once the lesson is taken, clinging to regret is self-inflicted torment. Amor fati reframes regret by asking, "If this was necessary for me to become who I am, can I love it as part of my fate?" This transforms regret from poison into medicine, freeing you from the cycle of self-blame. Instead of carrying regret as dead weight, you carry wisdom as nourishment. Even positive memories can become excess when they are clung to too tightly. People who constantly relive old victories or joys can trap themselves in comparison, always measuring the present against what once was. This prevents new joys from being recognized. The Stoics warned against chaining happiness to conditions that no longer exist. By releasing even the sweetest memories from obsessive grasp, you allow space for new moments to arrive. Gratitude remains, but attachment dissolves. Practical exercises can help unclutter memory. One is daily reflection, followed by release. Write down the lessons of the day, then let the events rest. Another is practicing presence by anchoring the mind in immediate sensations, breath, movement, or tasks, when the mind drifts into endless replay. A third is reframing. When past pain resurfaces, deliberately reinterpret it as training rather than punishment. Each exercise builds the habit of memory minimalism, keeping what is useful, discarding what weighs down. This discipline also reshapes relationships. Many conflicts persist because people hoard memories of every injury, storing them like weapons to be used in argument. By releasing memory clutter, you free relationships from constant reference to the past. Forgiveness becomes possible, not because you forget, but because you stop hoarding. You allow others to change, rather than freezing them in the role of their past mistakes. Relationships thrive when each day is allowed to be new. The hidden excess of memory also fuels fear of the future. When you cling to past failures, you project them forward, expecting repetition. When you cling to past successes, you fear they will never return. Both distortions prevent you from meeting the future openly. By practicing amor fati, you treat the past as finished, neither predictor nor prison. The future becomes less about repetition and more about unfolding. You step into it not bound by memory, but freed by acceptance. The liberation from memory clutter is profound. Without the constant replay of old stories, the mind becomes lighter, clearer, more able to notice what is happening now. Joy arises not from past recollection, but from present presence. Pain loses its sting because it is not rehearsed endlessly. Identity expands because it is no longer frozen in old definitions. The soul breathes freely, no longer stuffed with the weight of what has already passed. In the end, the minimalist mind does not reject memory, but uses it wisely. It learns from the past without hoarding it, honors experiences without clinging to them, and releases regret, nostalgia, and identity as forms of excess. Amor fati frees you by teaching that everything in the past was necessary, but nothing needs to be carried endlessly. What matters is the present, where life is lived, and the future, where fate continues to unfold. To let go of memory's clutter is to step fully into now, lighter, freer, and more alive than ever before. When the excess of memory is released and the grip of old stories no longer dictates the present, the mind feels lighter. Yet even when the past loosens its hold, another form of clutter remains, one that does not come from what has already happened, but from what might happen. Fear of the future often weighs more heavily than the past itself. Worries about loss, failure, or disaster pile up quietly in the mind, filling it with anxieties that may never even occur. The Stoics saw this as one of the greatest thieves of peace. Their response was not denial nor blind optimism, but a deliberate practice, negative visualization. By rehearsing potential loss before it arrives, you reduce the chaos of fear and create a kind of mental minimalism, clearing space for calm. Fear thrives in vagueness. When the mind refuses to look directly at possible loss, fear multiplies in shadows. It whispers that disaster lurks everywhere, yet it never defines its shape. The result is constant anxiety, an endless clutter of what-ifs with no resolution. Negative visualization confronts this directly. By imagining specific losses, the death of a loved one, the loss of wealth, the end of health, you bring fear out of the shadows and into clarity. Once named, fear loses much of its power. The mind becomes cleaner, less crowded with unformed anxieties. This practice may sound grim, but its effect is the opposite. Far from making life darker, it makes life brighter. When you consider the possibility of losing what you value, you awaken appreciation for what you have. Reflecting that this might be the last time you share a meal with a friend makes the meal more vivid. Thinking that your health may fail one day makes today's strength feel like a gift. In this way, negative visualization is not morbid, but life-enhancing, because it clears away complacency and replaces it with gratitude. The Stoics used this practice to dismantle the illusion of permanence. They knew that possessions break, relationships end, and life itself is temporary. To ignore this truth is to live in fear of its arrival. To face it in advance is to live freely, prepared for whatever comes. Seneca advised imagining poverty, exile, or death, not to despair but to rehearse, so that when misfortune arrives, the soul is not thrown into panic. In this way, negative visualization is like training. By practicing loss, you become stronger when loss becomes real. Fear is often cluttered because it accumulates silently. Every small worry joins the pile. Fear of illness, fear of rejection, fear of failure. Soon, the mind is full of anxieties, many of which never manifest. Negative visualization cuts through this clutter by confronting fears directly. Instead of dozens of vague anxieties floating in the mind, you deal with them clearly, one by one. You accept their possibility and release their grip. The result is not paralysis, but clarity, because you have faced the worst in thought and discovered you can endure it. This practice also protects against entitlement. Many people live as if tomorrow is guaranteed, as if their possessions, relationships, and health will last forever. This illusion breeds ingratitude and disappointment when life inevitably changes. Negative visualization shatters entitlement. By reminding yourself daily that nothing is promised, you treat each moment as precious. A simple conversation becomes a treasure. A breath of health becomes a miracle. A possession becomes something to be cared for, not taken for granted. Entitlement clutters the heart with expectation. Visualization clears it with awareness. The discipline of rehearsing loss also cultivates resilience. When adversity comes to those who never considered it, shock multiplies the pain. But those who have rehearsed loss meet it with steadier hearts. They have walked through it in the mind, prepared their souls for its weight, and so they are less shaken. This does not eliminate sorrow, but it prevents collapse. The Stoics did not seek to avoid grief, but to ensure that grief did not destroy reason. Negative visualization is the inoculation that prevents fear from overwhelming when reality arrives. Practical exercises bring this philosophy to life. Begin each day with reflection. Consider that possessions may be taken, relationships may end, life may change suddenly. Do not linger in despair. Simply acknowledge the possibility. Carry this thought lightly, not as doom, but as awareness. Another exercise is deliberate subtraction. Imagine your life without one comfort, one convenience, one luxury. Reflect that you could still live, still endure, still remain whole. This trains the mind to stop fearing the loss of what is not essential. Negative visualization can also be practiced in relationships. When with a loved one, remind yourself that this moment is not guaranteed to repeat. This awareness sharpens presence. You listen more deeply, cherish more fully, and waste less time on trivial conflict. The fear of eventual loss is transformed into gratitude for present connection. In this way, visualization deepens love rather than diminishing it. In work and ambition, the practice tempers attachment to outcome. Consider the possibility of failure, of plans not unfolding as desired. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, you see that even failure is survivable, that your worth does not depend on outcome. This reduces the anxiety that clutters effort and allows you to act with greater focus. By rehearsing failure, you free yourself from its tyranny and discover the courage to attempt without fear. Health is another area where negative visualization brings freedom. Many live in denial of illness or aging, and when it comes, they are shattered. But by reflecting daily that health is temporary, you savor strength when you have it and prepare your mind for its eventual decline. This makes illness less terrifying and health more precious. You are no longer enslaved to fear of loss because you have already faced it in thought. The deeper gift of this practice is perspective. When you accept that everything you love is temporary, you stop wasting energy on trivial annoyances. Petty frustrations shrink in importance when you remember that life itself is fragile. The clutter of irritation, complaint, and resentment dissolves. What remains is a sharper focus on what truly matters. Living with virtue, loving deeply, and acting with presence. In the end, negative visualization is minimalism of fear. It clears the crowded mind of vague anxieties by facing them openly. It transforms fear into preparation, entitlement into gratitude, fragility into resilience. Far from darkening life, it illuminates it, because it teaches you to see the value of every moment before it disappears. By rehearsing loss, you do not lose joy, you deepen it. You live more fully, love more freely, and walk more lightly, because fear no longer clutters the soul. This is why the Stoics practiced it daily, not to dwell in sorrow, but to live with clarity, courage, and peace. When fear is decluttered through the practice of negative visualization, the mind stands lighter and steadier. The anxieties that once crowded your inner space begin to dissolve, leaving clarity in their place. But there is another form of excess that quietly shapes life, an excess not of possessions or fears, but of people. Modern culture often equates connection with numbers, more friends, more followers, more networks. Yet abundance in relationships can become as overwhelming as abundance in objects. The Stoics taught that friendship is not measured by quantity, but by depth, not by how many surround you, but by how few stand with you in truth. Minimalism of relationships is therefore a discipline of pruning, of choosing quality over quantity, guided by ideals that keep bonds genuine, meaningful, and aligned with virtue. Human beings are social by nature, but not every social bond nourishes. Many connections are superficial, built on convenience, flattery, or shared distraction. These ties may provide temporary comfort, but they drain energy over time. They clutter the emotional landscape, filling it with obligations, gossip, or noise that distracts from what truly matters. A minimalist approach to relationships does not reject connection, but refines it, focusing only on bonds that strengthen character, encourage growth, and stand rooted in trust. The result is fewer ties, but stronger ones, bonds that hold firm in both joy and hardship. The Stoics drew a distinction between acquaintanceship and friendship. Acquaintances are many, but friendship, in its true form, is rare. Seneca wrote that a true friend is another self, someone with whom you can speak as openly as with yourself. This kind of depth cannot be multiplied endlessly. It requires time, trust, and vulnerability, resources that cannot be stretched across countless ties. Minimalism of relationships begins with recognizing this truth, that intimacy cannot be mass-produced, and that seeking quantity dilutes the quality of connection. Modern culture complicates this by glorifying numbers. Social media measures worth by followers, society prizes broad networking, and many chase popularity as if it were proof of value. But these forms of abundance often leave people lonelier than before. The Stoic alternative is to reject numbers as a measure of connection. One true friend, rooted in virtue, is wealth enough. A minimalist approach frees you from the exhausting pursuit of popularity and allows you to cultivate the rare gift of genuine companionship. Clutter in relationships often shows itself in shallow obligations. Many fill their calendars with social commitments that bring no joy or growth, attending gatherings out of duty or fear of missing out. These ties drain time and scatter attention. By practicing minimalism, you learn to decline what is hollow and choose what is nourishing. A single deep conversation with a trusted friend outweighs dozens of superficial encounters. This selectivity is not arrogance, but wisdom, the recognition that time and presence are limited and that they should be spent where they matter most. Trust is the cornerstone of Stoic friendship. Without trust, connection remains surface level, built on performance or appearances. But trust requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. Many avoid depth in relationships out of fear of rejection, hiding behind masks. Yet masks create clutter because they force you to manage an image instead of sharing yourself. Minimalism in relationships calls for removing these masks, allowing vulnerability to replace performance. The result is fewer but truer bonds. Connections built not on illusion, but on reality. This approach also reshapes how you respond to conflict. In shallow relationships, disagreement often leads to collapse because the bond was never rooted deeply enough to endure. In genuine friendships, conflict becomes a chance for growth, a test that strengthens rather than weakens. A minimalist perspective seeks not to avoid conflict, but to engage it honestly, trusting that truth can refine connection. By focusing on quality, you choose bonds strong enough to weather storms rather than fragile ties that dissolve at the first sign of difficulty. Minimalism in relationships also extends to the self. Many people surround themselves with others to avoid solitude, mistaking constant company for richness of life. But dependency on numbers hides a fear of being alone. The Stoics taught that friendship with oneself is the foundation of all other friendships. When you are at peace in solitude, you no longer cling desperately to shallow ties. You choose companions not out of fear, but out of genuine desire for shared growth. Solitude unclutters the heart, making room for true connection to take root. This discipline reshapes how you love. Romantic relationships, when approached without minimalism, can become cluttered with need, expectation, and performance. Many measure love by constant intensity, by endless gestures, by proving worth through possession. But true love, like Stoic friendship, is rooted in simplicity, honesty, trust, and the shared pursuit of virtue. A minimalist view strips away drama and excess, leaving a bond that is steady, quiet, and enduring. It values presence over performance, depth over spectacle. Practical exercises can refine this approach. One is reflection. Regularly ask which relationships bring strength and which drain it. Do not cling out of habit to ties that no longer serve growth. Another is the practice of intentional presence. When with someone, give full attention, putting aside distractions. A third is gratitude. Acknowledge the value of those who stand with you in truth, treating them not as background, but as treasures. Each practice reduces relational clutter and deepens the bonds that remain. Minimalism of relationships also challenges the cultural obsession with networking. While connections can open opportunities, chasing them endlessly reduces people to stepping stones. The Stoic view rejects using others for gain. True bonds are not tools, but ends in themselves, spaces where virtue can flourish, where honesty can thrive. By rejecting opportunism, you free yourself from the shallow scramble of accumulating contacts and instead build the few connections that bring meaning. This philosophy also protects against betrayal. When you scatter your trust across many shallow ties, disappointment becomes frequent. But when you concentrate on fewer, deeper bonds, trust grows stronger and betrayal becomes rarer. Even if it comes, you endure with greater resilience because you did not dilute yourself across hundreds of fragile ties. The minimalist approach makes relationships fewer but sturdier, capable of holding more weight without breaking. Ultimately, the Stoic ideal of friendship was mutual growth. Friends were seen as companions in the pursuit of virtue, mirrors who reflect your character and help you refine it. Minimalism in relationships returns you to this ideal. It strips away the clutter of convenience, popularity, and superficiality, leaving only bonds that shape you toward wisdom and courage. These friendships are not many, but they are enough. In the end, minimalism of relationships is about depth, not denial. It does not reject connection, but curates it, choosing quality over quantity, honesty over appearance, and virtue over popularity. By pruning the excess, you free yourself from the noise of shallow ties and open space for genuine companionship. Guided by Stoic ideals, you discover that fewer but truer bonds bring greater peace, greater strength, and greater meaning than any crowd ever could. And in this way, relationships themselves become a form of minimalism, uncluttered, simple, and rooted in what lasts. Every lesson we've walked through, from releasing small irritations to embracing impermanence, from pruning words to decluttering desires, from rehearsing loss to choosing fewer but deeper bonds, comes back to one unshakable truth. Freedom is found in letting go. The Stoic art of amor fati and minimalism is not about losing life, but about gaining it fully. By shedding what is unnecessary, whether possessions, fears, identities, or expectations, you uncover the quiet strength to live with clarity, gratitude, and peace. Obstacles become teachers, loss becomes beauty, and uncertainty becomes a companion instead of an enemy. Now it's your turn. Which part of this journey spoke most to you? Was it the practice of negative visualization, the discipline of simplifying relationships, or the radical freedom of loving fate itself? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear how you're bringing these ideas into your own life. And if this message resonated with you, don't let it slip away. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and join this growing community of people learning to live with less noise, less fear, and more wisdom. Your next step toward a lighter, freer life starts here.